So it is Monday, May 6th, 6:03 p.m., and we will call the Burlington City Council to order. I will note that we have two councilors that are online, or three councilors online at the moment: Councilor Litwin, Councilor Doherty, Councilor Grant. For the record, because we will have councilors online as we take votes this evening, if on any vote we do not have unanimity, then state law will require that we go to a roll call vote at that point in time. The first item on our agenda is a motion to amend our agenda. Can I call on one of my colleagues here to move to amend the agenda as listed on Civic Clerk? Councilor Shannon.
I move to amend and adopt the agenda as follows. Remove from the consent agenda item 5.28, Proposal ZA 2404, Neighborhood Code Part 2 Topics, Planning, and place it on the deliberative agenda as item 6.7. Moving to 6.8, the resolution negotiations between the Vermont Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals and the University of Vermont Medical Center per City Council President Travers per Councilor Grant. And to add to the consent agenda item 5.36, Indoor and Outdoor Entertainment Permit Renewals 2024-2025.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there a second on that motion? Second by Councilor Carpenter. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We have our agenda. Public forum this evening is for a time certain at 6:15, so we will skip over that for a moment and move to item 3 on our agenda, which is climate emergency reports. Is there any councilor or the mayor's office with a climate emergency report? Seeing none, we will turn to item 4 on the agenda, which is our public health and safety emergency updates. Are there any councilors with a public health and safety emergency update? Councilor Grant, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that just to keep in everybody's mind, Decker Towers, the residents there continue to not be in a safe situation. Want to extend a big thank you to the mayor who met recently with their residents board and was able to talk to them. So hopefully we will be able to come up with some other solutions for them and have an additional update at a later time. We had attached to this item on the agenda the latest figures from the state's attorney's office. I like to look at these figures and recommend that people in the public look at these figures so that they have an understanding of the caseload of the Chittenden State's Attorney's Office because of all of the misinformation, disinformation, that nothing gets done in that office, etc. So their total caseload continues to be of just a little bit under 3,000 criminal cases. These include 675 retail thefts, 96 burglaries, 35 assault or robberies, 139 aggravated assaults, operation without owner's consent, aka car thefts, 182, and grand larceny, which is mostly related to car thefts, 51. In addition, there was some more information about how they also prosecute all the juvenile delinquencies, fish and game tickets, judicial bureau appeals, and post-conviction appeals, as well as what are called chin petitions, which are cases that they need to get involved in that involved a case where a child needs some type of supervision or intervention. And that adds roughly an additional 1,000 cases. So just to continue to educate people about what that workload is, what they're actually carrying. This is for Chittenden County as a whole because the court system cannot break out by town. So We've attached these numbers. Also attached to this item is the uh, police chief's report to his commission from the month of April. So we encourage the public to review this information. The public frequently asks, are we in building back? How many officers do we have? How many are on patrol? The number of the most common incidents that people are interested in is all on that report, in addition to other information. And big shout out to Lori for getting those updated for me. Really appreciate it. I've been sick and didn't get it taken care of last week, but she got those up today. And that is all that I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant, and as always, really appreciate your submitting those materials for the public online as well. Any other councilors with a public health and safety emergency update? Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, President Travers. I just wanted to call to the council's attention consent agenda item 5.6, a letter from McCormick, Fitzpatrick, Casper, and Burchard. We discussed this at our last meeting during public safety emergencies. But just to recap this letter, it's a law firm on George Street that followed up on March 29th about concerns they had raised 7 months earlier and since have documented over 100 concerning incidents, including trespass, drug use, and other unauthorized activity on their property. And that continues to create real challenges for their employees and for their clientele. These activities began with the sighting of the pod shelter in their neighborhood. And I encourage everyone on the council again to read the letter. I raised the issue again tonight because Overdose Prevention Center legislation was passed last week in Montpelier, authorizing a pilot in Burlington. And if we end up locating an OPC in Burlington, we need to have a proactive plan for managing the potential impacts to OPC neighbors and requiring that Montpelier is also funding resources to prevent these collateral effects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Any other councilors with a public health and safety emergency update? All right. Turning back to our last agenda item, Councilor Kane, I think I may have missed you on a climate emergency update, so happy to turn back to you on that.
Thank you, President Travers. I just wanted to mention briefly that California over the last month has met its energy demand from renewable energy in more than 75% of days. So that's energy from wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal. So I just want to put that out there in the spirit of making sure that we're being as ambitious as we can be here in Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Kane. Any other councilors on either of these agenda items? All right, seeing none, it is 6:11 now. We still have a couple minutes until we turn to public forum. For our new councilors, I will tell you that we cannot turn to our consent or deliberative agenda until after public forum. And so I will turn now to after our deliberative agenda, item number 7, which is our committee reports. And if I could ask councilors, if any councilor has a committee report regarding upcoming meetings or what's before your committee, now would be an appropriate time to do that. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you, President Travers. The Ordinance Committee met last week, and there were 3 items that we discussed. The trespass ordinance, all of which have been referred to our committee. The trespass ordinance, the graffiti ordinance, and the recommendations of the dog task force. On the trespass ordinance and the graffiti ordinance, we're going to have another meeting on May 16th, tentatively scheduled at 2 o'clock, to discuss these 2 ordinances and look at drafts from the city attorney's office. Given the stresses on the city attorney's office right now with being short-staffed, it was the committee's decision to postpone further discussions on the dog task force, which is a more than 70-page document, has many, many recommendations, some of which would really fall to different departments of the city. Much of it for the Parks Department. So we're going to be asking those departments to weigh in and give the ordinance committee feedback, and then take this back up the end of August with the hope that we will be better staffed in the city attorney's office, and that they can provide more guidance and drafting on changes to an ordinance at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any other councilors with a committee report? Councilor Bergman?
So the Charter Change Committee met on May 1st, and I want to use this as an opportunity to say that I was wrong in thinking that we would not get back from the Police Commission anything, and I'm happy that I'm wrong, because our committee will be taking up police oversight and commissioners' comments at 2 meetings that we have scheduled, the June 12th and June 18th, both starting at 5 o'clock. We also discussed an item that we had previously taken up, this is 2 years ago, counselor compensation, and the whole question of the barriers that counselors face, or that people in our community face, when posed with the opportunity and the question of whether they would like to try to serve the people in this capacity. And pay is one of the issues, and so we will be taking that up as well, and hopefully we'll be bringing back charter changes on these items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Any other councilors with a committee report? Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I just would like to encourage the residents of our city. Part of my continuing goal to get more people to use Civic Clerk, going to the City of Burlington's website, clicking on the calendar, and then just looking at the days. The REIB committee met on April 30th, the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee, and we received a very full update of the various projects that the REIB department is working on. So I definitely encourage people to review those minutes. 2 things really looking forward to: the Juneteenth event that's coming up. We had an introduction to that. We are also, the Embrace and Belonging ceremony will be occurring. Construction is underway for that sculpture to be placed in Dewey Park in the Old North End. And there were many other items on that agenda, and I encourage people to either review the meeting, watch the meeting, or just review the minutes. Our Public Safety Committee was April 18th. We had quite an extensive conversation about open issues and different issues that we want to discuss in the realm of public safety, continuing to provide more data that would be available to the public, continuing to talk more about the drug crisis, having information about recruitment, etc. So once again, that meeting was on April 18th. The minutes are very detailed, and also the meeting is available to be watched once again in Civic Clerk when you click from the calendar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. If there are no other committee reports, then we will turn to public forum and open public forum at 6:17 p.m. Under our council rules, we will first hear from Burlington residents here in City Hall, and then among those online, followed by non-Burlington residents. Again, first here in City Hall and then online. Each speaker this evening will be provided 2 minutes. When I call your name, if you're here in person, please come to the table, make sure the microphone is on, and please speak directly into the microphone. For those online, I will let you know once you've been unmuted. We have a handful of speakers this evening for public forum, but I think it's a nice opportunity to reaffirm some standards for our public forum. We have recently had representatives from hate groups try to use our public forum as a platform, and some of us around this table have been the recipients of unacceptable threats in recent weeks and months. And with that in mind, again, I think it important to reaffirm certain standards for the public forum. When providing comments, please direct them to me as the chair and not to any other individual. Public comment should be limited to public issues and not targeted towards individuals. It is important that City Hall remain a safe place for those who serve, those in attendance, and those tuning in. The city respects and values a diversity of opinions and perspectives. We ask, however, that all comments be free from hate, harassment, or other derogatory language about other people or groups based on age, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, or any other protected characteristic. We also ask that public commenters avoid conduct which is unreasonably loud, disruptive, or discourteous. Any public comment that involves threats, fighting words, or obscenities will be considered disruptive. Speakers will be provided one opportunity to correct any issues identified that are causing a disruption here in City Hall. If the public comments continues in violation of these standards that I've just set forth, a commenter's opportunity for public comment may be ended at that time. With that in mind, I think we will now turn to those Burlington residents that are here in person at City Hall. The first individual that we have is Michael Nettle, to be followed by Jacob Berkowitz. I think it's not on.
Here we go.
There we go. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Liddell. I'm a citizen, taxpayer, and resident of the Old North End. I want to talk about the overflow activity around the pods on Elmwood. It's not good. Since the pods have existed, we've seen a 1,000% increase in sketchy behavior on Elmwood. There's public drug usage, flagrant trespass, people passed out, and people climbing into the cemetery. This was every non-rainy day last spring, summer, and fall. And now that winter break is over, I'm seeing this activity again every day, every non-rainy or non-freezing day. Since I've seen more than one person climb the fence into the cemetery with a roll of toilet paper in their hand, I'll let you figure out what they were going in there to do. And they don't even have to hop. There's a retaining wall and the remnants of an old street lamp where the fence starts right on Elmwood. So you got sidewalk, retaining wall, old street lamp, and then you're into the cemetery. Really easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a very easy staircase. I've witnessed that staircase be used at least 200 times last season. Some go in the cemetery to do other things than poop. Some people stay there. There are 3 tents in the cemetery right now. I've written the former mayor. I've written Parks and Rec about this, and they've been about 3, 4, 5 of these meetings to let people know that something should be done. If it were up to me, glad you asked. You could just put a bigger fence in that one section. You could take away the base of that old street lamp, or change the design of the retaining wall to make it easy, or make it less easy to hop over the fence, because right now it's very easy. You can even have routine and regular scheduled patrols go up and down Elmwood, which would probably be the preferred way to go. But it's not up to me. I'm just a private citizen, taxpayer, husband, band member, artist, and cat butler. I have work to do. I've let people not in this room and in this room know about this issue multiple times, and nothing's been done about it, so I'm asking this situation be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next have Jacob Berkowitz, to be followed by Jack Tiano.
Hello, my name is Jacob. Some of you may remember me from when I spoke in front of you last summer on behalf of my support staff colleagues who had unionized at the UVM Medical Center. Thanks in part to your support, I can gladly say that support staff working conditions, wages, and staffing deficits have substantially improved over the last 8 months since our contract. I come now to ask you for the same support for my own nurse colleagues during their negotiations with the hospital, which began last month. In my job as an inpatient nursing staffing specialist, I have helped nurses navigate staffing shortages, the cyber attack of 2020, COVID, and the innumerable crises we face in our beleaguered healthcare system. I've seen them work tirelessly and put themselves in harm's way to ensure safe care for our patients and community, and I'm honored to work alongside them and call many of them friends. At a personal level, I'm tired of hearing about my friends getting assaulted. One was punched in the face this very morning in the surgical ICU. I'm tired of having my friends move away because they can't afford to live here with what the hospital pays them. and I'm tired of how the UVM Health Network monopoly has no interest in helping to fix any of their issues. It is disappointing, yet unsurprising, that the administration of UVMMC offers little more than pizzas and platitudes when their nurses come to them with concerns. Topics like staff safety, healthcare costs, and inability to use earned time off all fall on deaf ears. And of course, the hospital is once again pleading poverty despite all their multi-million-dollar development plans, extremely disproportionate executive to staff ratios, and consistent huge year-over-year pay raises for said executives. I can go on about how messed up it is, but given the time restraint, I'll finish with this. In the coming months, I urge you all to stand with the healthcare workers who serve you and your families. I hope you all choose to be on the right side of history. I hope you seize this opportunity to be able to tell your children and grandchildren that when you had the choice to join the nurses in scrubs or the suits, the admins in suits, that your decision was an easy one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. We next have Jack, please. Thank you. We next have Jack Tiano, to be followed by Robin Lloyd.
Hello. So my name is Jack Tiano. I live in Ward 5. First of all, hello to the new faces. There's a bunch of new city councilors, a new mayor. It's nice to see you all. This is my first city council meeting since you all came together. And so I'm just here, I'm just speaking off the cuff today. The last time I was here was when the last council unanimously passed the neighborhood code. I was one of the many residents speaking in favor of the neighborhood code, wanting to see us start beginning to tackle our housing crisis more seriously. As we kind of move on to phase 2 of that process, I want to reiterate that the last time I was here speaking, I was letting you all know that there's a lot of people in the city that are interested in kind of urban policy and how the connection between affordability and housing and transportation and public transit and all these things are connected. And there's a lot of us who want to work with you on that. So things like green space, stormwater management, livability, parking, safety, these are all things that me and a lot of the other people who are speaking in favor of the housing that neighborhood code was kind of tackling. That's still stuff that I'm interested in working with you on, that a lot of other people are interested in working with you on. So just there's a lot of complicated or nuanced ways that these things interplay, and so making sure that as we move forward with neighborhood code, that we're not looking at it in a vacuum, and that we're realizing that we can put all of these things together and come up with things that make sense, especially given the deficit the city is facing. There's a lot that also kind of plays into how city finances work, not just in Burlington, but around the country in terms of how we prioritize different ways of housing and transportation systems. So this is just me saying, we're still here. I took a break of being around for the last month, but I'm still here. Other people are still here. Reach out to us. I'll reach out to you. Good to see you all. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you, Jack. We have one more Burlington resident here in City Hall, and that is Robin Lloyd. We then have one Burlington resident online who we will turn to, and then we have one non-Burlington resident to turn back to wrap up public forum. Ms. Lloyd, thank you for being here.
Yes, well, hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I missed your inaugural event, and I'm so glad that there are many new council members here and our mayor. So I look forward to a very successful term with all of you. What I would like to urge is that you consider again what the previous councilors voted on several times but did not pass, and that is a ceasefire, support for a ceasefire. It's happening right now that there's good news coming out from the Middle East, that there's some kind of peace settlement, and it just seems to me that this city, especially being the city where those 3 young men were shot, and I know the previous council voted on that and was, I think it was tied in terms of any statement on that, and hopefully some news will come out on that. So in the coming year, I'm hoping there will be other issues related to Burlington's foreign policy and development of sister cities around the world. And I look forward to all the good things you're going to do.
Thank you very much. We are now going to turn online, and we have one person signed up online, and that is Sharon Busher. And Sharon, I think I know what your Zoom name is, and I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, assuming that is you.
Thank you, President
Yes.
Travers. It is me.
Okay.
Sharon Busher, Burlington resident, and I know you've had a little respite from neighborhood code, so I am going to bring it up. It is on your agenda, on your deliberative agenda, the last item. And the communication from the Planning Commission gives you an opportunity to make sure that it is addressing everything that you felt needed to be addressed in this interim period before the second structure is allowed to be built. I think that what they say is they're going to address the height of the structure. They're going to deal with historic districts. They're going to talk about non-conforming encroaching into setbacks. In other words, if you have a non-conforming structure and it encroaches into a setback, could it be turned into a living space? And I'm not opposed to that, but I think people living in that is different than storage in a unit. So encroachment into setbacks is something serious as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that didn't seem to be addressed, because as the previous speaker mentioned, this crosses number of department lines, but the stormwater issue still needs to be addressed. And I think it can be mandated that there needs to be some mitigation. Affordability is still out there. And the only way affordability will happen is if it's mandated in some form. And the other thing that was left out is Burlington is a tree city, and there's nothing there to protect mature trees from just clear cutting. And that was one of the things that was said early on. Last thing I want to say is that this process was very brief. Look at what you've got as a proposal for a 2-year process for rezoning the new North End. And that's only one section of Burlington. You rezone the whole city in 8 months. I'm not sure how well that was thoroughly vetted in that brief period of time. And I think if you do that comparison, draw your own conclusion. But thank you very much. And I look forward to all of this getting done before October 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. We had continued a rule that was started by the last council for individuals participating online to sign up at least an hour in advance, but I do see one person that has perhaps signed up within that window who I know is a Burlington resident, and at my discretion here will allow them the opportunity to participate in public comment, and that is Liz Curry. Liz, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you should be allowed to go ahead now. Thank you.
Thank you, President Travers. I'm sorry I didn't sign up. I just saw the agenda when I was done with work, and I saw Councilor Kane's front porch forum. So thank you for allowing me to speak. My name's Liz Curry. I'm from Ward 3. I'm speaking as someone with a background in energy efficiency in building rehab and the low-income sector. To Councilor Kane's point on the climate emergency report, I'm speaking to item 6.4. You know, renewables include demand management and lowering demand. And generally, I'd like to speak in support of the pilot BED is proposing, but their approach is not necessarily best practice for controlling higher electricity use and cost. Best practice is to provide comprehensive insulation and air sealing first. Unless the pilot is targeting and focusing on the multifamily sector for low-income people, then renters will be the least likely served by this pilot. In the leakiest buildings, it's unlikely that the technology will mitigate increased electricity usage and cost of air source heat pumps without weatherization. The cleanest kilowatt hour is the one never used. So I'm speaking with limited understanding. I had a chance to read the memo. It was very technical, and it's difficult to understand the technical way that these issues are presented. But my understanding of it is it's a piece of technology that monitors usage and will try to provide a credit for additional usage. But what we need from our municipality is really comprehensive program design that tackles the hardest to serve in low-income apartments with a weatherization and a heat pump package. We have tariff financing capabilities now, so the repayment burden doesn't land on any one household. It's stretched over time and paid off on an electric bill, just like rates. It would be great to see our utility move more aggressively in that direction of weatherization and heat pumps combined to ensure a just transition to a clean energy future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. We had one additional non-Burlington resident here in person in City Hall, and this is Dale Walsh. No, we're good.
I've never done this before. My name is Dale Walsh, and unfortunately, I don't live in Burlington. I live up in St. Albans, which is very nice, by the way. I wanted to jump up when you started talking about health and public safety, because I feel the council could really support the nursing staff or the staff at UVM Medical Center. I think it is a community health and public safety crisis. Okay, so I've been a nurse for over 30 years. I've experienced across the continuum of healthcare. I've had the pleasure of working at UVM Medical Center for the last 7 years, and I absolutely love working there. I love my patients, and I am passionate about patient care and patient continuity of care. Since the pandemic, we have had just a lot of traveling nurses coming through our door. And unfortunately, it has given our young folks, oh my God, I'm so old, our new nurses a lot of things to think about, because these travelers that they're training every other week are getting paid twice the amount as they are. I have seen a lot of talented, compassionate nurses, young people, not being able to afford to live in our community because UVM Medical Center hasn't been able to match the salaries that we pay to train the travelers and to keep the travelers coming every 3 months. So that really saddens me. And above all, we are attracting a lot of new graduate nurses here. We have a state-of-the-art facility that we train these nurses in. They stay for a year, maybe, to get a lot of great experience in our community, and then they leave. So I would appreciate it if you would support our movement to support our nursing staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, come on up. And then we have one additional Burlington resident for public comment. If you could just please state your name, because I don't think we had it fully filled out. Thank you.
I wanted to know, when are the roads going to be fixed and sidewalks are going to be fixed? Because some of them are not passable down by Cathedral Square. We need a whole new sidewalk. And they said, one of the girls I know, she's on vacation. She said something about 2025 that we're on the docket for getting our sidewalks and roads repaired. But this is 2024, just a year before. And I wondered when it was going to be done, because a lot of people want to walk up Church Street, and the sidewalks that are right past the courthouse are impossible to walk. A lot of people have physical challenges, not just me, but other people. When is that going to be done?
Yeah, thank you, Jane. The public forum isn't really an opportunity to answer your specific questions, but I know that folks from Department of Public Works are tuned in, and we'll work to get someone to follow up with you.
All right. My telephone number is 863-2052, area code 802.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. All right, it is 6:38 p.m. and seeing no one else for public forum, we will go ahead and close public forum at this point in time. That then takes us to item 5 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended and take the actions indicated? Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our consent agenda is adopted. That takes us now to our deliberative agenda. The first item on our deliberative agenda is item 6.1, a tobacco license application for 2024-2025 for the 3545 Community Store and Kitchen at 1563 North Avenue. For a motion on that matter, I will turn to the chair of the License Committee, Councilor Shannon.
Thank you, President Travers. I move to approve the 2024-2025 tobacco license application for 3545 Community Store and Kitchen at 1563 North Ave.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilor Broderick, thank you. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of the motion on item 6.1, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries unanimously. The next item on our agenda is 6.2, a lease agreement for the Community Justice Center at Post Apartments. On this matter, I will ask that CEDO Director Pine come to the table and to flag for us any other individuals we should be promoting on Zoom, please. I think, Director Pine, if it makes sense to you, we may turn the floor over to you before a motion from the council.
Good evening, it's Brian Pine, Director of the Community and Economic Development Office.
Good evening, Eric Ramakrishnan, Assistant City Attorney.
The lease before you tonight.
Sorry to interrupt you, Director Pine, but just before you begin, is there anyone, I do see folks from the CJC and CHT online. Should I be promoting them as panelists, and are there any other individuals?
That would be appreciated.
Okay, great.
You're moving so rapidly that no one envisioned business at this early hour. So people are probably eating while they're watching.
Well, they're here, and they're promoted, so sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Sure. I will quickly try to summarize how we got where we are, other than I think the material tonight that's in the package should explain the terms of the lease agreement. Essentially, the Community Justice Center was launched by the city in 1998 and had 5 different homes that it has operated out of, and none of those homes have been, probably the nicest one was actually above City Market. It was the anchor tenant to get the downtown City Market underway and to have upper floor office space created in that building. But that was a short-lived tenancy because City Market needed the space and CJC was had to relocate at that point. But the needs of the Community Justice Center have grown as the needs for the services provided by the CJC have grown and has played an increasingly important role. Significant number of volunteers that serve the Community Justice Center, and it has been it's been a very challenging place for the CJC to operate out of 200 Church, which it has for the last number of years. And essentially, what we began doing when I assumed this position in 2021 was to look at opportunities in the downtown near as close as possible to the core sort of services, including the courts, because it's important that there be a location that supports pretty frequent, regular interaction with the court system. And CJC has a long track record of 26 years now of operating programs, securing the funds to operate those programs. I would note it's about a $1.5 million annual operating budget for the Community Justice Center. A little over 100, about 120 of that comes from the city, and the rest comes from primarily state sources. Some federal as well, but primarily state sources. And looking at different options, the cost to find good space that was suitable for the CJC was really proving difficult to find adequate space at the right cost, and the quality, as you looked at cost, there was a direct relationship. And so we looked at what are some opportunities for potentially partnering with someone to create space, and that's when Champlain Housing Trust was also looking at a redevelopment of the former VFW. And so this was a relationship that came about through a long partnership, as I noted, during the Board of Finance. Right around this time, 40 years ago, the city, through CEDO, launched the Burlington Community Land Trust, which is the now today CHT. And so our partnership goes back 4 decades, and it seemed like a good direction to pursue, to be meeting the needs of the city through the CJC, but also to serve as an anchor tenant so that Champlain Housing Trust could, ensure that the VFW site gets fully redeveloped, and it will also include a home for the VFW. So, as I like to say, it's a win-win-win. And by the way, 100% tax-exempt property will go to the tax rolls as well. So the CJC's needs are entirely built into the design of this building already, with the hopes that this approval will be granted. But the reason why we're here now to get approval for a lease on a building that won't be ready to be occupied until the end of 2025 or early 26 is really to satisfy the investors and the lenders who are providing the capital to Champlain Housing Trust and their development partner, Evernorth, under the low-income housing tax credit. It's typical to have this type of requirement when you have housing can get leased up instantly. Office space is not quite as easy, and so they want to see proof that there is a commitment. As our city attorney will note, we are required as a city to not make a commitment other than commitments we can keep through your funding decisions, through the annual appropriations process. So there's language in there to cover that. Hopefully it won't be necessary, but if it came to it, we have non-appropriation language, which essentially gives the city the ability to basically break the lease if necessary under the terms of the lease. It's built into that. So I think I've covered the main points, but I'm going to ask Eric if there's anything you wanted to mention that I might have forgotten.
You covered anything I would have wanted to say, but I'm happy to take questions about the non-appropriation clause or any other legal issue.
Okay. Thank you both. And then just to round out the presentation, is there anyone from the CJC or from Champlain Housing Trust that wanted to weigh in as well?
They're here to be at your service if needed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Before turning to councilors, could I turn to Councilor Carpenter for a motion on this item?
Yes, I would like to move that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute the proposed 15-year lease between the City of Burlington and Post Apartments Housing Limited Partnership for office space located at 176 South Louis Avenue.
Point of information. I'm sorry, but I believe that for the
mic.
record, we should use a mic.
Okay, sorry, your mic's not on, Councilor Carpenter.
I would move that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute the proposed 15-year lease between the City of Burlington and Post Apartments Housing Limited Partnership for office space located at 176 South Winooski Avenue to be used to house the Community Justice Center.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second on that motion? Second from Councilor McKnight. Councilor Carpenter, would you like the floor back first?
Sure, just for a second. I think Director Pine has answered our questions, and the council has had occasion in executive session to discuss as well. I just want to reiterate that I think this is a really good and appropriate move for the Community Justice Center. We should be very proud of all the work that they've done over these 40 years. And unfortunately, in the last number of years, I'm not sure how many, in tremendously inadequate space. They need to move, but they do need to be in the center city, particularly as Director Pine pointed out, close to the courts and other referring agencies. So this seems like a wonderful opportunity. You know, I am aware that this will increase their rent significantly, but I'm also aware that CEDO and the CJC are working a number of strategies to bridge that gap, and I feel pretty confident that they'll be able to do that.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Any other councilors that would like to speak to this motion? I will look online. Councilor Shannon, right next to me.
Too close to see. I know how that is. At our last meeting, I had some concerns about entering into a lease on brand-new Class A office space. And given that there's so many opportunities for cheaper space all around the city since COVID caused a real reduction in our need for office space. But I appreciate the opportunity to review this lease, and I think you guys have done a great job on getting a price for this lease that seems to me very competitive in the marketplace. And while it is an increase in annual rent, this rent is pretty low, and the space that the CJC is currently occupying is so woefully inadequate. I think you can expect to pay more for space that is adequate. So I think all of that is well and good. I wondered if you could explain, but I still have a concern, given our budget constraints, about funding for the CJC, which is a regional program, and what the city is paying for versus the region, and our burden for that. And I understand that to move this forward, it is the city that's going to have to enter into this lease agreement at this time, and we can look more holistically at that budget and who is paying for what. But as our next topic is going to be the sale of 200 Church Street and possibly using some of those funds for rent, as well as other funds that you have secured. I wondered if you could just speak to that and how you think that that is going to work in the long term to provide funds. And it's not really clear how much of the revenue from the sale of 200 Church Street is expected to be reserved for this. Thanks.
Sure, and just to clarify, that's a conceptual notion right now, the idea that we would capture some of the sale proceeds, but it is certainly on the list of potential opportunities. When the Department of Corrections met with the city in the late 1990s and said, we're going to launch this community justice center concept, and Burlington seems to be a great place if you're willing, and then Mayor Clavell said, we'll take it, we just want to make sure you're going to fund it. And so fortunately, the lion's share of the cost of operating the CJC is actually funded by the state. One of the things that happened, though, was that other municipalities created their own community justice centers, and so we have 4 in Chittenden County, and it used to be 5, and I think the writing is, if I were to read tea leaves, I guess is the best way to look at it, it's probably not going to be 4 CJCs in Chittenden County for the long foreseeable future. I think it's going to be in the coming couple of years when the consolidation or merger of some functions of the various CJCs happens, and positioning Burlington to be the survivor of that process is really important. We think that it's likely that a new facility, a facility with a little bit of room for growth and sort of reconfiguration of space lends itself well to that. Looking at the other communities, if there was to be a regionalization, we'd be expecting the other communities to participate in the cost of operating at that point if that were to happen. The state, I think, will eventually lead with their funding decisions on how community justice is organized and delivered in the future. And we get a real sense from talking with the state partners that they're leaning toward more of a regional approach, but remains to be seen how that will be structured. Specifically with this lease payment, which would begin either at the end of 2025 calendar year or the beginning of 26, we have secured through Senator Sanders' congressionally directed spending earmark of $300,000 for the fit up of the space. So you basically think of it as a shell that you get, and it's basically a plain vanilla shell, and you need to fit it up, and that cost is built into that. We've also secured a pretty sizable award from the state of Vermont sales tax reallocation to cover the infrastructure, the public portion of the right-of-way that gets rebuilt as a result of this project. And there's a little bit of we'll use those dollars to cover costs which otherwise would have fallen on the development, and in exchange, you will cover costs to fit up the space. And so there's creative, innovative financing happening as we speak. And the hope is that we actually capitalize a rent reserve that will be the equivalent of perhaps 2 years of operations for the rent payment, and that we, over the next 2 years, secure increased allocations from our funders to account for the fact that you've got a top quality justice center. You also need to actually pay for the delivery of that through increased funding for the operating costs and the occupancy costs. And so that's a case we're making, and I think pretty confident we'll be able to do that.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any other councilors wish to speak to this item? Anyone online? All right, seeing none, then we will go to a vote. All in favor of the motion on 6.2 as made by Councilor Carpenter, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. We now move to item 6.3 with the same presenters. So Director Pine, here we are at the potential sale of 200 Church Street, and I turn the floor to you again.
Yeah, there we go. The history of this property is that the city acquired the property in 2005 as a facility to operate and launch the Burlington Telecom, and retained ownership of the property when the assets of Burlington Telecom were transferred. The initial first transfer was in 2014, when there was sort of a workout, if you will, of a telecom that was in financial trouble, to a holding company, which was actually called Blue Water Holdings. And that was to allow the city time to work out a suitable legal and financial strategy for resolving the issues around Burlington Telecom. The sale that finally took place in 2017 between the city and Shores Communication is stipulated through an asset purchase agreement that the city would, either through what's called a right of first refusal, which I'll explain the difference in a minute, or through an option that's exclusively exercised by Shores/BT, Burlington Telecom, the city would essentially be on the hook to sell the building by 2034 if Burlington Telecom so chooses. And when I said right of first refusal, what that means is that at any time, if the city decides to put it on the market, and it literally means put it on the market, put up a sign, get a broker, put it on the open market, Burlington Telecom has that right to purchase before anyone else. And you go through a process that's spelled out. You go through appraisals. If you disagree, you get a third appraiser, and there's a process you have to go through. The option is triggered in 2034 if the city doesn't up to that point put the property on the market. Burlington Telecom has the sole right to exercise an option that only they have, and it's not one that the city essentially, we have a say in determining the price, but the city has no say in whether or not they exercise the option. It's really at their discretion. So I think I've described that accurately. Just have to double check with the legal perspective here. Key thing to remember is that 2/3 of that building have been leased to Burlington Telecom for both their offices, so their staff, and what's called the Network Operations Center. Think of it as like the central nervous system, if you will, of a telecom system that used to be just Burlington, then it started to go into other towns. Now it's fully regional, it's spreading throughout our region, and that's the home of Burlington Telecom. The CJC and HR are on the floor that is facing Church Street, so it's kind of called the ground floor, even though it's technically really the second floor, and the offices for Burlington Telecom are upstairs. We have an annual lease payment of roughly $120,000 that comes from BT to the city. Total annual expenses for the property without what we call a replacement reserve or a capital reserve, and without any property taxes, because it's still tax exempt because it's owned by the city, of around $65,000 annual operating expenses. The city would, if we no longer owned it, as soon as we no longer own it, it goes on the tax rolls at the next taxable period, which is April 1 of the year. Human Resources and CJC are both very supportive of the idea of essentially disposing of the property. From their perspective, it's not adequate or suitable quality space for them and their staff and their clients. I think you've seen in the memo what the HR perspective is on that. We already have talked just previously about space for CJC, and the CAO's staff will be working with HR to find suitable replacement space for the Human Resources Department. As I mentioned, the parent company of BT is Shores, and they own and operate 6 broadband subsidiaries, I think in 6 different states. They've confirmed that their model is to own the properties from which they operate, because they want to be certain that the investment in their network operations center is secure, and that's through ownership. The asset purchase agreement, that was the agreement that was signed in 2017, envisions the sale of both the land and the building from the city to BT. So there was a question about ground lease, and that was addressed through the agreement, and BT does not have a desire to ground lease the property. The current lease term for the property we're in the first renewal period. It gets a little technical in these renewal periods, but there's essentially 3 renewal periods. We're in the first renewal period right now. It just started at the end of March. So I mentioned 2 key facts from that asset purchase agreement is the right of first refusal and the option. The third renewal term, and I want to clarify this because in previous communication, incorrectly I stated that in a memo that the third term we'd done sort of the calculations wrong, not getting that the first lease term was not one of the renewal terms, it was one of the original terms. But the third renewal term actually begins on April 1st of 2034. So that date is why that's important, is that triggers the option that BT has to purchase the property. The key hurdles that the city faces with continued ownership of the property, which we've gone over, but I'll mention again, has significant capital needs, an HVAC system which is beyond the end of useful life, and a rubber membrane roof that needs to be replaced in entirety. The HVAC is a number that we have from a previous actual quote in a bidding process. It came in at right around 1.2 million. That was a couple of years ago. We put in a modest escalator. It's pretty safe to say it's probably going to be closer to 1.5 million to replace the entire HVAC system. The roof, which was an estimate received before COVID, was at $110,000. So our facility staff feels that with today's conditions and with cost increases, that's easily a $200,000 roof replacement facing the city. So what we are faced with is a building that has significant capital needs, that provides space to primarily a private entity, and that city uses of the property will be coming to a close within the next 18 months or so. There are no specific funds that are set aside to complete the upgrades needed to 200 Church. It would obviously take money from the capital funds and capital account that are needed for other improvements that were outlined in the memo, such as upgrades to the downtown central fire station and the Burlington Police Station on North Avenue, as well as investments like continuing to green the city's fleet, which I think is a real priority for the city. We've reached agreement on this sale at this price, $1,571,000, under the terms and conditions that are contained in the purchase agreement in your packet tonight. Once the agreement is signed, BT will commence the work at their cost, even though the closing doesn't occur until early '25.
Yeah, they have until January 2025 for the inspections, and then we close a month later.
I think I've summarized what I'd intended to cover, but we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Thank you, Director Pine. I think, again, before turning to the council, just so we have a sense of the issues that are teed up for the council's consideration, if I could turn it to Councilor Carpenter to read off a relatively lengthy motion here.
Yes. I would move to approve the proposed purchase option exercise agreement and license and use agreement with Champlain Broadband LLC for the sale and use of 200 Church Street, and authorize the mayor to execute both agreements on behalf of the city. As well, I would move to authorize the mayor or designee to take such further actions and to execute such further instruments as may be necessary or convenient to accomplish the transactions contemplated in the purchase option exercise agreement and license and use agreement subject to review and approval by the city attorney. And finally, I would move to authorize the chief administrative officer to establish a separate fund in the assigned fund balance to accept the proceeds of the sale of 200 Church Street and make any expenditures required to carry out the purchase option exercise agreement and license and use agreement, and make all necessary budget transfers in relation to thereto.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilor McKnight. Councilor Carpenter, would you like the floor back on this one?
Just briefly, the council members have been briefed several times on this, and I think given the extent of the liability we carry to, as a landlord, if we don't improve or repair this building, we have a significant out-of-pocket liability immediately that we have to exercise. And so I think this sale is prudent. And I also want to point out, just because I've been asked this by the public, this particular building sits with 100% lot coverage. We do not own the parking lot behind. Several people have commented to me, why were we selling the parking lot? Well, we do not own the parking lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Any other councilors that would like to speak on this item? Councilor Newbeezer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all the information laid out, and I never want to be onerous on city staff, but I appreciate you helping me better understand this issue and hopefully better communicate it to constituents. I just want to state for my constituents, because a lot of folks in general have been concerned over the last number of years of selling off a number of our public assets, and unfortunately we don't have a choice at this stage, because we're sort of already locked into losing this. The question is when and what's going to make the most sense financially. I think you've made an adequate case, to say the least, and certainly the materials back that up clearly. I'll also just say, in terms of the conditions in the building for city workers, I appreciate that other councilors and other folks have raised those. It's clear that they're inadequate facilities. Yeah, and I'll just say on a personal note, as someone who has been sober for 6 years and received help in part from the CJC, yeah, it is important that we're making sure we're taking care of our folks. So I appreciate that piece. Yeah, and then I'll just say too, I think, if I'm understanding it correctly, I mean, there's some discussion around making sure we have enough wiggle room in terms of time to then identify sources of funding. And I think, not being an expert by any means, I think in general, as we're facing an incredibly large deficit, and it's certainly a challenge ahead of us. We need to double down our efforts, and I stated at the first council meeting, our first working meeting, and I'll keep stating that we need to be investigating progressive taxation reforms in ways that we can really target revenue generation to folks who can afford it, folks who are doing phenomenally well, so that we can adequately fund basic city services. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Any other councilors like to speak to? Is that a hand from you, Councilor Bergman? All right.
Yes, I was just seeing if anybody else would want to do that. So I am going to be voting in favor of this, but I am very unhappy. As a general proposition, I don't believe in selling off public assets. I have watched us do that across the board, and I am unhappy with that. But mostly, it's the timing that we have been given. This came in March, and if you look at the memo, and I think it's pretty comprehensive, we'll see that there were investigations in 2022. That's like 2 years ago. Now, to be told that you've got to like sell a big piece of property in a month when folks have known that there are these issues does not make me happy, and I'm trying to be really polite about that. I mean, this is like a fire sale. I have supported and will continue to support the major redevelopment that we're having down in the center of town. Main Street, great streets, the work that may happen at the Memorial Block, the City Place, all those things are going to lead to, I believe, very good and appreciating values in the downtown in a decade. I think that we will see that. We'll see a transformation over the course of the year. So when I look at this, I am unhappy with the former administration and what I think is fundamentally a fire sale. But I was hoping that there would be IRA funds around climate, and there are not more than tens of thousands of dollars. You need hundreds of thousands of dollars to deal with HVAC, climate change stuff, but apparently not monies for us, and a roof that we knew about 2 years ago. I was hoping that we might be able to explore ground lease, but it's awful late to be trying to work out something, particularly when you have a partner or a potential buyer who has a business model that is looking for ownership. And that's totally reasonable from their standpoint. So to think that we're going to be able to force a sale on that term makes it exceedingly difficult. Exploding toilets, pretty outrageous, and we don't want our workers to be in those conditions. But it speaks to the overall lack of transparency as well as just caretaking. And like I said, it leaves me particularly unhappy. It is not going to be a vote that leaves a good taste in my mouth, but but that's part of the job. And so sometimes we have to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. We will go to Councilor Broderick next, and then Councilor Grant, and then just to get a sense of things, are there any other councilors that would like to speak to the item? Councilor Shannon. Okay. Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. I echo Councilor Bergman's comments. I'm reluctant to give away city property, but I hope that the sale of 200 Church and the having to go into private-public partnerships with companies for buildings like Memorial Block and potentially the fire station is the kick in the pants that this city needs to end this culture of deferred maintenance and putting things off. I understand the budget that we're in, but the more we defer our maintenance on these buildings that our city owns, the more likely we end up in this situation where we have to sell it off because there's frankly nothing we can do, and that's why I'm voting yes, because there is nothing we can do at this point. And it is very frustrating, the whole timeline. Obviously, I just got on council, so it's a little overwhelming to have to sell off city property and have to go through all these questions that I have. Thank you for answering a majority of them. And I do feel confident in voting yes on this, but like I said, I hope that we can make a commitment as a city to end this practice of letting our buildings fall into disrepair and then having to lose them. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Broderick. We'll go to Councilor Grant online and then Councilor Shannon.
Thank you. So I echo the concerns raised by Councilors Bergman and Broderick. I'm going to vote yes, but it just leaves a real dirty taste. I don't like the idea of a backroom deal having been done and a price having already been fixed without the council really being involved in that. That does not make me comfortable at all. I understand that you don't negotiate with the public, but we should be including the representatives of the public in these negotiations. So to come back and say, you know, the earth's going to end if we don't take this price, this fire sale price, and this and give it to them for that. And then the issues around the agreement and the option. And so why would we want to invest in this building if we're going to could basically lose it? Because why wouldn't they want the building? That building has tremendous value to them. So I do appreciate answering the questions that we had. I would have liked to have seen those questions, the opportunity to ask those questions before we were locked in. I just feel like we're locked in really without a legitimate option to do the best deal for the people in Burlington. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you, President Travers. I'm not sure what was intended by the price fixed comment, but I do have questions about the price. It looks like BT got an appraisal, and then we did an estimate based on the income approach, and we did not get an appraisal. And I wondered if, why would we not get our own appraisal? As the process that you outlined, I think that the city has a right of first offer rather than a right of first refusal. And a right of first refusal, they would be having to match the price that somebody else has offered, which does tell you what the market will bear to some extent. But in the right of first offer, which is what I think we had and what we're moving forward with in this case, usually both sides get an appraisal.
Sure, the city actually did obtain an appraisal. Ours was prepared by Larry Martin Appraisals, and theirs was prepared by Kirk Kaffenberger. Their appraiser took the approach of getting information on the cost of the improvements that were needed, and so they backed out not 100%, but most of those costs from their number. So the city's appraisal from Larry Martin came in at 2.2, with the assumption that there was no major upgrades needed. So it's basically as is, but it doesn't need these improvements. Whereas the Kaffenberger appraisal actually used what they call in the industry extraordinary assumptions about the improvements that are required. So if you go and negotiate a property and you notice that the roof is failing, you might tell the seller, I want you to cover that, or we'll cover it 50-50. So that's essentially how we arrived at a number of $1,571,000.
Okay, I apologize because that is in your memo and I missed that point. But when you worked out the income approach, you also came to the 1.5 value, is that, or?
that was exactly what the income approach arrived at, was 1.571, and it was, within close enough to the two appraisals after you factor in the cost of the improvements that are needed that it was within the ballpark.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Shannon. Are there any other councilors that wish to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, we will then go to a vote. We'll try to do a voice vote on this. All in favor of the motion on 6.3 as presented by Councilor Carpenter, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Director Pine, for making yourself available. Thank you as well, Attorney Ramakrishnan. I know that your assistance has been really valuable to this process as well, so thank you. Next, we will turn to item 6.4. We have General Manager Springer here from the Burlington Electric Department on the Heat Pump Bill Credit Program and Commercial Demand Response Program. Just in terms of what will be next up after this, we had warned a local control commission meeting to start at 7:30 p.m. So as soon as item 6.4 is done, we will briefly recess the city council meeting and turn to the local control commission meeting in case there's anyone tuned into the meeting for that purpose. General Manager Springer, thank you very much for being back again and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors. Good to be here with you to talk about an exciting new program. And I have a couple of colleagues who are with me on Zoom, James Gibbons, Emily Stebbins-Wheelock, who are also listed on the memo. I'm going to forego slides and just kind of summarize the program. I can definitely share slides if it's helpful. But really what we're trying to do at a basic level here is something that we've done with electric vehicles, which is we want to make the cost of charging an electric vehicle cheaper than driving with gasoline. We want to make the cost of heating with an electric heat pump cheaper than heating with natural gas or fossil fuels. Currently, with electric vehicles, whether you charge at home or at a public station in Burlington, it is cheaper on a kind of per gallon equivalent to charge up your electric vehicle than it is to fill up with gas. In terms of our home charging rate, where it's off-peak, we're talking about 70 to 75 cents a gallon equivalent. For our public stations, they're typically between $1.50 and $1.70 gallon equivalent. Gas is currently around $3.40 a gallon, so good deal if you are driving an electric vehicle. With heat pumps, it's a much more challenging environment. The price of natural gas is fairly low. Heat pumps have occasionally been cost competitive on an operating basis, but most of the time, to heat with a heat pump is more expensive than to heat with natural gas. You are going to get some savings if you're using any type of window air conditioning unit, for example, and you replace that with a heat pump. Heat pump is going to be much more efficient. So we've had a longstanding goal to work out a way to help lower the cost of heating with heat pumps. And we have a couple components that have come together for this pilot program. One of which is we were selected, the only utility in Vermont, for what's called a GRIP grant from the federal government, which is competitive climate funds. We're receiving $1.158 million. We'll be bringing that grant to the council for acceptance once we've negotiated the scope fully with the Department of Energy, so that'll be forthcoming probably in the next few months. But with those funds, we're able to help customers who have a heat pump or who are going to install a heat pump get two devices that are going to help them participate in this pilot. One is something called a Sensibo. It's a small square device that can go on a wall and it plugs into an outlet. It's Wi-Fi connected and it lets you control your heat pump as a customer from your phone if you want to. It also allows the utility to send a signal to adjust the thermostat within a set range. So that's one piece. And then the second piece to monitor and make sure we're seeing savings during peak periods is something called an Emporia View, which is essentially a clamp that can go on the circuit for the heat pump or heat pumps in the electric panel. And it'll give us real-time data in terms of the usage. So what we're trying to do is send a signal to heat pumps that would participate in this program, to people who have a heat pump in the program, during peak periods every month, and certainly for the annual peak, and help reduce their usage a little bit during those peak periods. And even just turning the thermostat a few degrees can make a big difference if we're aggregating it over 1,000 heat pumps, for example. And so the idea would be if you sign up to participate, you'll get these devices paid for in part by the federal grant. We'll get an electrician to help install the Emporia View, and you'll get the Sensibo device, and you'll be able to receive a bill credit, and we've pegged that at $5 a month to start with for the heat pump program, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And that will help begin to lower your cost for operating the heat pump. The ultimate goal really though is this is a pilot, 18-month pilot. We want to learn from the experience, and we would like to, if the data supports it, convert this to a per kilowatt hour rate that's just like our EV rate in a sense. And that will allow a deeper discount and will give the customer actually more benefit. But this pilot will give us the data to ensure that that is the right path to go forward with, and that the equipment is working the way that we hope. We've tested these devices with 9 customers just as an initial matter, and that gave us a range of potential savings that justifies the $5 a month bill credit. Actually would justify even a little bit of a larger credit, but we want to start off a little bit conservative and make sure we have room to increase it as opposed to starting off too generous and having to pull it back. So the idea here is we would submit this if it's approved at the Public Utility Commission and we bring the grant forward. The program could roll out perhaps later this summer. I believe we have funding within the grant to support potentially 1,000 heat pumps participating in the program. As we talked about, I think during the Net Zero Roadmap update, we have over 2,300 heat pumps in the city. So this would give us the ability to sign up a good number of customers for the pilot and give them the opportunity to help us test this, and if it's successful, convert it to a per kilowatt hour rate that would even further drive down the cost for heat pumps. We are going to work with commercial customers as well who have heat pumps or other types of electric heating devices as well, so there will be a commercial component to the program. And this will be an important kind of opportunity for us to test with a wider cohort than the initial 9 that we had tested with before. So really pleased to bring this to you tonight. I'll pause there to see if there are questions that we can answer, and glad to get into more detail.
Thank you, Darren. Any, well, as we've been doing here, why don't we first turn to a motion here, and for that, could I turn to the chair of our 2 committee, Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, President Travers. I'll move that the City Council approve the General Manager of the Burlington Electric Department or his designee to file with the Vermont Public Utility Commission a pilot rate to provide a monthly bill credit and/or a pilot rate to customers installing BED-approved measurement and control devices on electric heating systems.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow, second by Councilor Bergman. Councilor Barlow, would you like the floor back?
Sure, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation, Darren, and you and I have talked a little bit about this. Just to contextualize this program within the Net Zero Roadmap, could you talk a little bit about how this fits into the city's climate goals? And additionally, could you address the comments we heard during public forum about the relationship of this program to weatherization and whether or not we should be doing weatherization before offering a credit like this? Thanks.
Absolutely. So in terms of the climate benefits, when we think about the roadmap, as folks may recall, about 60% of the pathway for achieving the roadmap is to move buildings towards efficiency and electric heating. And that includes heat pumps, that includes other heating technologies in the electric space. So this is a big portion of what we hope to accomplish with the roadmap. And we have over 2,300 heat pumps, which is good. It's a start. We've seen some linear growth really since the green stimulus programs during the pandemic. We know we want to grow that even further. There are great incentives on the purchasing side right now in terms of tax incentives, BED rebates, in terms of helping you to get the equipment. But once you're running the equipment, like I said, it's still more expensive to heat with the heat pump than it is to heat with fossil fuel. And so our goal is to make it cost effective for the customer not only to purchase the heat pump, but to operate the heat pump. We have a lot of hybrid homes and buildings in Burlington, and a lot of people who have both natural gas heating and a heat pump. And they're going to have the choice, in a sense, of which one to use. And I've heard every type of usage scenario. Some people turn off the gas, essentially, to whichever zone they have the heat pumps, and they're using the heat pumps 100% of the time. in the zone they have them. I'm in that category for the wintertime in our house, where somebody may have a system that operates with the heat pumps down to a certain temperature and then flips over to the gas system in other scenarios. Some people really may kind of change it based on their comfort, but we want to make it economically efficient for them, cost savings for them if they're running the heat pump as much as possible in the winter. So that's from the climate standpoint. In terms of weatherization, we certainly agree that we want to have buildings not only have heat pumps, but we weatherized as well. This is really not a program that's incentivizing the purchase of heat pumps. This is really about for people who have the heat pump, let's make sure we can use it as efficiently as possible. We have a number of policies, obviously, in the city around weatherization. We do some of the weatherization incentives, but we have a lot of partners in the city who do weatherization work, including CVOEO. Vermont Gas does weatherization work. So these are complementary programs very much, and we support, having heat pumps and weatherization certainly in every building that we can get them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Any other councilors want to speak to this item? Councilor Bergman?
Just a quick question. Any difference between a split pump and a vented,
Centrally ducted?
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, so I think these are going to be, the pilot is going to be particularly effective for the ductless mini splits. That's really going to be, I think, the target for the program. A lot of the centrally ducted systems have a little bit more sophisticated controls on them where they're switching over at a certain set point, and we may not be able to get the peak savings off of those in just the same way that we could with the mini splits. But so the idea is if you have a mini split and it's running in the summertime on air conditioning, we might be able to adjust a few degrees and make it a little bit warmer in the room within a comfort level, and vice versa in the winter we might be able to sort of preheat and then turn down the heating element for a couple of hours. Not turn it off. I want to be really clear. With the EV rate, we have a section of time where you don't charge. And that's, you can do that with an EV because you're able to charge overnight, wake up in the morning. We know if somebody's using a heat pump for heating, for comfort, to stay warm, we don't want to turn it off. We're talking about adjustments that are within just a couple degrees, but could help us save on peak usage. And that saves all of our customers money. That reduces the need for the region to have dirty generators running during peak times. And it also helps reduce our transmission and capacity needs so that the grid as a whole is more efficient.
So to be clear, you would be doing that from BED.
Correct.
And you can do it for both the ducted and the ductless, and you're looking to include both of those so that you can understand how this pilot is going to work.
Yeah, we're including any electric technology. Okay. The application may be different in different use cases, and because it's a pilot, it really is about getting data from a different set of customers, really in all different types of use cases, and figuring out what works well.
And again, the cost to participate to individuals will be borne by the department. It won't be borne by them.
Correct. Okay. Between the grant and matching funds that we'll have available through our revenue bond, the cost to participate will be covered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Any other councilors wish to speak to this item? Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. My first question is in regards to the 9-participant trial study. Could you describe the results of that and what made you think, what worked with those 9 participants?
Yes. In fact, I've got a little bit of data here. We looked at, we took kind of the cost to serve from an electric standpoint and looked at transmission and capacity. We looked at what the usage was for these 9 customers, some of whom I should say had multiple heat pump units, some only had one. For example, I have 3 heat pump units off of 1 main unit, essentially, so 1 in each bedroom. So I could be 1 customer but have 3 units. Some customers only have 1. I think the largest number we had was 5 heads within the heat pump space. And so we looked at it and we derived sort of a cost to serve and what the credit range would be in different scenarios. One was a worst case scenario where we basically got no peak savings whatsoever. And there the credit value would have been justified at $4.42 instead of $5 per heat pump unit, so not per customer. And the maximum that we saw, if we got every single peak, we were correct in calling it and getting through to the customer unit and getting the reduction, we could justify $7.46 credit per unit. So we're being conservative and going with the $5 and making that kind of per customer as opposed to per heat pump unit. But that's why I'm suggesting that if this is successful and we go to a per kilowatt hour rate, then if somebody has, 4 or 5 heat pumps units or 2 or 3, then whatever they're using, they'll be able to reduce and get savings for. So that'll be the ultimate goal. But for now, we're using this data to inform our cost to serve and the bill credit number. 5 is a nice round number, but it actually turns out it was well justified.
Great. And then my other question is, so if your best case scenario does go forward, how, for all BED ratepayers, how close does that get us to heat pumps reaching the lower cost of natural gas?
It'll depend. So this will be about an 18-month pilot, so we'd have to look forward at, because gas prices move around quite a bit. Electric prices are a little bit more stable. So, a couple years ago when we saw a spike in gas prices due to the start of the war in Ukraine, there was a period of time where heat pumps were actually more cost competitive than gas just currently. That has eroded because the price has come back down. But if we looked out about 18 months, we would have to see what the price of gas is and what the per kilowatt hour credit we can justify based on the pilot is. And we would do as much as we could within the kind of justified data to make it as cost competitive as possible. So going to a rate structure instead of a bill credit, doing it per unit as opposed to per customer, those are all levers that we can pull to help make it even more cost effective for the customer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. I do not have any other councilors in the queue. Councilor Newbeezer.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say thank you. I think this is a move in the right direction, and the more that we can get off of combustion fuels toward electrification makes a whole lot of sense to me. And if we can save working families in this city some money in the process, that seems like a win-win. So I'll be supporting this, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Grant.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. The only comment I would like to make is, how are we promoting this? I guess something to think about for providing future information in terms of how successful we're being getting more of these updates out there, getting more households to embrace heat pumps, to understand in as simple terms possible what the benefits are to them and what the rebates are available to them. And also, how are we communicating with landlords so that they know what the options are and what they can do to make improvements. We are all very much aware of a lot of price gouging on rental properties in the market right now. And we have a fair amount of properties, regretfully, that aren't being kept up the way we would like to see. But how are we trying to get through to some of those people? I would like in the future to hear more information about that, and hear information about landlords that are embracing this technology that helps fight climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. I did want to mention that we're hoping to present at the TUC in the near future some of our work on outreach and equity from Ita Meno and Jen Green and others who are doing a lot of work in the community to be in different community spaces, and also creating video content, which I think you may have suggested to me at one point that we should do more with videos, short videos. We're embracing your suggestion. We have a new video that's out that's just about very simple about understanding your electric bill, because we do get a lot of questions from people who may not understand some of the pieces of their electric bill and how it works. And we're hoping to build off of that and do some more videos that people can watch and learn about heat pumps. But I appreciate as well the focus on rental properties, because this pilot could well apply for rental properties too. So we want to make renters aware if they have a heat pump in their unit that they might be able to work with us on this. And we also do want to make property owners aware that if they have heat pumps in their building, that this may be something that we can work on with them. So that outreach will definitely be part of our plan once the pilot is ready to roll out later this summer.
Thank you.
Any other councilors wish to speak? Councilor Kane.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Do you know what percentage of heat pumps in this city are installed in rental units versus homes that are owned and occupied?
I don't have a breakdown. I know there are rental properties that are 100% heat pumped. I've visited several properties that are, completely on heat pumps. So we know there are a number that are in rental properties. I know that of the kind of 1,200 or so that we've done, since June of 2020, I think the bulk of those are in single-family homes, by and large. We have around 2,300 total. So it might be close to kind of a 50-50 breakdown, but we could look into it more and share some numbers with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Any other councilors wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, then we will go to a vote. All in favor of the motion made by Councilor Barlow on item 6.4, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Darren.
Thank you.
So as indicated before, we do have a local control commission meeting that was posted for 7:30 p.m. It is now 7:38 p.m. and we will temporarily recess the city council meeting and now turn to the local control commission meeting. And at 7:39 p.m. now, call to order the local control commission. And the first item on that agenda is a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion along those lines?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Shannon. Is there a second?
Second.
Hey, thank you, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So a point of information for the city attorney, because I saw Mayor Mulvaney-Stanek. The mayor is a member of the local control commission. Okay, thank you for confirming that. All right, we'll get you in here, Mayor. It's okay. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Bergman. We'll give Commissioner Shannon the second on that. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We have 4 items on our deliberative agenda, and for the first item on the deliberative agenda, I will turn to the chair of the License Committee, Commissioner Shannon.
Move to approve the 2024-2025 first and third class liquor license applications for Fire and Gold LLC, 294 North Winooski Avenue, contingent upon fire marshal approval and with all standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Broderick. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We move to item 3.2, and I'll turn back to you, Commissioner Shannon.
Move to approve the 2024-2025 first and third class liquor license applications for Majestic, 616 South Willard Street, with the following conditions: contingent upon fire marshal approval, all city permits need to be closed out, and with all standard conditions.
Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Commissioner Mulvaney-Stanek. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item 3.2 carries unanimously. We turn now to item 3.3, and Commissioner Shannon, I will turn back to you.
Move to approve the 2024-2025 outside consumption permit application for Majestic, 616 South Willard Street, with the following condition: all city permits need to be closed out.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Grant. Any discussion on item 3.3? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We now turn to the last item on our agenda, 3.4, and Commissioner Shannon, I will turn back to you again.
Move to approve the 2024-2025 second-class store liquor license application for 3545 Community Store and Kitchen at 1563 North Avenue with all standard conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner Shannon. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Carpenter. Any discussion on that item? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Seeing no other business, we will adjourn the Local Control Commission meeting at 7:42 p.m. and resume the City Council meeting. And in our City Council meeting, we are up to item 6.5, which is the Chittenden Solid Waste District proposed FY25 budget. On this item, I believe we have Sarah Reeves, if I'm not mistaken. And Sarah, if we could turn to you, and I see we have Beth Parent here as well, and Lee Perry from the Department of Public Works, so thank you all for being here. Sarah, am I turning to you first?
Actually, it's Beth Parent, we're going to share. She will be providing the presentation.
Okay, perfect.
Action is always great.
Great. So Beth, feel free to go ahead.
Still not letting me. Let me try again.
Okay. In terms of sharing
Correct.
your screen?
It's
Okay. I don't know.
host disabled participant sharing, screen sharing.
Let me see here.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, there we go. I think maybe CAO Shad is online and did that for you. So if that's the case, thank you very much, Catherine. And
Great.
you should be good to go. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I do appreciate the time at the council and the agenda. My name is Sarah Reeves. I'm the executive director for the Chittenden Solid Waste District, and we are going to present our fiscal 25 budget. And based on feedback from prior year's presentations, I have been asked to start a little bit with who we are. And who we are is a regional municipal entity that is charged with managing the waste that is generated in Chittenden County. And we are a member organization, so all of the 18 cities and towns in Chittenden County are our membership. So where we generate revenue, and we're here to talk tonight about that, it's a budget, is in three main areas. You can see that in the pie chart for fiscal 23. The first main area is user fees or tip fees, and those are the fees that are paid directly to CSWD at a drop-off center or at our compost facility or recycling facility. Another main area of our revenue is that SWMF, which stands for Solid Waste Management Fee. That is a fee that is charged to haulers at the point of disposal. So either at a transfer station or at the landfill and carbon. And the third area that we see revenue from is material and product sales. So we pay compost and topsoil and garden mix. So we sell those products. We also produce a recycled paint product called local paint, local color. And we also sell recycling that we process at our materials recycling facility. Where we do not receive any revenue, though, is from local property taxes. So we do not send the city a bill. Actually, you send us a bill. And we don't receive any money from your property taxes. We do not also assess you a capital fee.
Sarah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just, I think it might be on our end here that we need to turn the volume up a little bit more, but I don't know if we could do that. So if there's any way that you're able to get a little bit closer to your microphone on your computer, I think it may be helpful. So I apologize for that.
And I apologize too. My spring allergies are affecting my volume a little bit, so I do apologize for that. I'll try to do better. This area, this slide is how we're doing. And I'm going to point you to that column number 3, which are the tons landfill. And in fiscal 23, Chittenden County residents and visitors, they generated 120,000 tons of material that was sent to the Coventry landfill. Of that, roughly half would have been diverted to either recycling or compost or as special materials like battery recycling or electronics, or recycled as construction and demolition debris. So we work really hard, and Debbie Parent actually is leading our outreach and education team. We work really hard to remind folks about the other ways to divert that material. And of the remaining that does go landfill, we work on helping folks to learn how to not generate that in the first place. So for fiscal 25, we are anticipating revenue just under $16 million. Again, there are the three main buckets of revenue. That sale of materials figure does tend to go up and down. The bulk of what it makes that material, that wedge up, is revenue from the materials recycling facility. Two main areas of our expenses. We're anticipating expenses just over 16 million, which this is probably not a surprise for anyone, as payroll expenses and materials management. And materials management are the fees that we pay, that CSWD pays, mainly the haulers, to move materials either to disposal or to market. But it's also where we factor in the contract that we have with Casella to operate the materials recycling facility. And right now that line item is about $4 million. This is the first time that I have presented a budget to the council where I am showing a deficit and a shortfall. This is not normally how we budget things, or we want to show things. We always get to zero, and you can see that we are at bottom getting to zero. So in a moment, I'm going to explain how we're going to address this potential shortfall. So if everything in this budget goes exactly according to how we've written it down, we would experience a budget shortfall of just under $300,000. So to cover that, we would draw from our undesignated reserve, which is fully funded. However, we always conservatively under budget certain areas, over budget certain areas. We always under budget our income related to the materials recycling facility. And that's because we do not control the price that we are paid for the paper and the cardboard and the plastics and the aluminum that we sell to the market and back out to recyclers. We also conservatively over budget on things like wages and benefits. We do have just under 5 full-time employees, full-time equivalents in this budget. We don't know who the folks are going to be, so we always budget for a full family plan, for example. We tend to come in under the budget for that line, but we always make sure we over budget them. Where we would love to fully expend our line item, and we don't, is on the community cleanup fund. And that is money that each of our communities receives or has available to you each year for a local project related to solid waste. The city has $10,000 allotted to it each year. I'm not sure if we have any projects in the hopper yet, but the projects generally bubble up from the community. They can be a project from the commissioner, but the request would go through the commissioner. And they, again, can be anything related to solid waste. So some towns and cities do tire roundups. Some have done extended their cleanup activities. There's a host of projects that are available. And I know Burlington has used the fund in the past, but that number resets each July 1. So as of last month, you have $10,000. You'll get another slightly on July 1 as well, but it does not carry over. So the change, one of the big changes in this budget is an increase to the solid waste management fee. And again, that is the fee that is charged to haulers at the point of disposal. This fee has not increased since fiscal year 2013. It is going from $27 a ton to $30 a ton as of July 1. And when we did add a potential impact to per household, should the fee be spread across all households in Chittenden County, it comes to less than 30 cents per month per household. Our drop-off center customers will not be seeing that impact. CSWD does pay that fee as well when we pay our bill to the seller for taking the material to the landfill. But because that fee is built into the cost of the bags at the drop-off center, the cost of trash, we are not increasing the cost of the bags versus the bags, so drop-off center customers actually will not be feeling this. We are also increasing the tipping fee or the user fee at the materials recycling facility. This fee is paid by haulers and actually is paid also by the city of Burlington. We're going from $85 a ton to $90 a ton. This brings us in line, and roughly we're still on the lower edge of the regional northeast average for both facilities. It's, again, it's on the lower end of that average. There is a significant line item associated with operations for this particular facility. This is the old MRF. This is the current MRF, and it is aging. And we had fully intended to have the new materials recycling facility built 2 to 2.5 years ago. COVID stepped in and affected that timeline. So we were delayed by 2.5 years. And that is just the amount of time to get us to this facility's end of life. So because we are at its end of useful life, it is needing some significant investments just to keep it running. So it was not anticipated, not expected that we would still be in this building at this point. So we are having to bolster the operations with some much needed Band-Aids. Some good news though, we are not increasing the tip fee at the organics recycling facility. It will remain at $70 per ton. We did increase our pricing, however, for the compost products that we sell. We did a market analysis and realized we were at the lower tier, the lower bottom end of regional pricing for like products. So we are now at the middle of that. And sales remain very, very strong for our compost, our topsoil, and our garden mix. We do also have a new contamination policy that will be beginning July 1. The board authorized this at their last meeting. And this is to address ongoing issues with unwanted materials in the food scrap deliveries. So things such as milk cartons, juice cartons, garbage bags for garbage, metal, things that just should not be in there that cause us to incur additional costs and just getting that material out. So this is another tool in the toolbox. It's very similar to the existing policy that we have at the materials recycling facility. And it's a way that we can work with haulers and cleaning up material coming into the plant. Our drop-off centers, also good news. There will be no increase to bag prices. We did add an extra large bag size. So we now have 5 bag sizes at the drop-off centers. And big news for the city is that we are intending to reopen the Pine Street location. Should be the 1st to 2nd week of July. I'm hedging my bets a little bit. Next slide. Burlington. So for the drop-off center located in Burlington, we'll be bringing trash back to the location on Pine Street. We are reconfiguring the site just a little bit, staying within the current existing footprint, so staying within the fence. We are putting some new gates on the fence, but we're also reconfiguring that site and having a new schedule. We'll be open 5 days a week. So that brings it in line with all of our other drop-off centers, with the exception of Heinsberg. And the hope is that by opening Burlington also 5 days a week, it makes it consistent across all of our locations. But also part of the hope is that folks who are used to going on Saturday may try a different day during the week. If they know they have Tuesday through Friday available, to ease the pressure on traffic on Saturday, we're very hopeful people will take advantage of a much quicker experience if they go Tuesday through Friday. And we found that before COVID, that was the first summer that the farmers market had moved down onto Pine Street from downtown, and the traffic situation was pretty grim. So being able to try to limit the impact of the traffic combination with the farmers market is really important. So that's one of what we hope would be some of the benefits of being open 5 days a week. So again, we're bringing trash back to this location. So we'll be accepting trash, blue bin recycling, so we're basically household recycling, food scraps, and scrap metal. And again, the goal here is safety, and reducing traffic backups onto Pine Street. So things are going to be a little bit different. So I know we've been having a lot of great feedback from folks who can't wait to have us reopen more fully, but it will be different from what you knew back in 2019. So all the customers are actually going to be parking within the interior of the drop-off center. So no parking outside. It's going to be one lane. going into the facility. All vehicles, all customers will stop first at the payment booth. Trash is going to be priced by volume, not by scale. And this is again being consistent with all of the other drop-off centers, and it's much, much quicker. People will tell the attendant at the booth what they have, they will pay at the booth, and then they will move into the center, and they will park, and then they will walk the materials over to the various containers, whether it's the trash container, the recycling, scrap metal, or food scraps. And credit cards and debit cards will be accepted at this location as well. Couple of quick notes on some capital projects. Again, the big one is the new materials recycling facility. So this facility, we hope to be awarding the construction contract either this month or next month, breaking ground this summer, with hope to be commissioning that new facility by the end of the summer, early September, calendar 2025. So there's going to be a lot of activity over the Redmond Road. We're looking at Redmond Road and Williston. We are again mentioning configuring the cities of Burlington and Milton, and we're also doing a comprehensive stormwater infrastructure review of all of our facilities because of, as well, the massive rain events we've been having over the past. Our fund balances, our fund reserves are all adequately funded. They're in excellent shape with one exception, which is the landfill post-closure reserve. We are responsible for managing 3 closed landfills in Williston and at year 28 or 29 of the 30-year closure period. So it was expected that that reserve would dwindle down at this point. What could not have been anticipated was the potential need to manage PFAS and other chemicals in the landfill leachate. So until we have some additional clarity from the EPA and ANR and what our responsibilities would be, we need to beef up that reserve. And again, we also need to beef that up in the event that we need to do additional work on those landfills as a result of and each of our cities and towns has one vote to approve our budget, and we do ask for that approval. And with that, I would love to answer any of the questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any counselors with questions or comments? Counselor Grant.
Thank you. I cannot tell you how excited I am that the Burlington Drop-Off Center is going to get close to back to pre-COVID normal.
Us too.
I know that there are people who shall not be named that don't food scrap because you're not going. That's just the reality of the situation. We may have garbage pickup, we have citywide recycling, but you're not going to get people, we could get away with going down to McNeil with yard waste, but you're not getting us to go to Essex or South Burlington or somewhere. We're not doing it. And adding it to the garbage pickup, there's an expense to that is, for, my budget, I'm not comfortable with it. But I got a nice little pail.
Exactly. And
I know other people who do, and then I'm like, but we can't take it down to Burlington anymore. So I think that's just wonderful. I'm very excited to spread that news. And thank you very much for your presentation.
And what I didn't mention, but I'm glad you brought it up, Counselor, is that if a customer is bringing us trash, bringing us a bag of trash, the recycling is paid for with that bag, and the food scraps are paid for. So the fees for all three are contained in the price of the bag. So it is a very affordable option to be able to properly manage the food scraps, the recycling, and the trash. So thank you for bringing that up so I can make them.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Grant. Any other counselors wish to speak to this item? Counselor Newbeezer.
Sorry, I'll be really brief. I just want to say thank you for your presentation, and like Counselor Grant, I had one piece in particular I was excited about, which was the fact that I saw you'll be accepting debit and credit cards, which is such a small thing, but also makes normal people's lives so much easier day to day. And I know I just bought my first home, and we're working on a nursery and trying to refinish furniture from Junktiques, and yeah, having a little more convenience when we're trying to do home projects is helpful. So thank you for your work.
Thanks, Councilor Newbeezer. Any other councilors? Seeing none, there are two recommended actions listed on Civic Clerk. One is to approve the proposed budget. The other is to disapprove the proposed budget. Why don't we start with the first one here? Is there a motion to approve the CSWD proposed FY25 budget? Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote on that motion. All in favor of approving the CSWD proposed FY25 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Sarah, Beth, and Lee, for being here this evening.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
We will now turn to item 6.6. This is a resolution relating to the relationship between city officials and the Neighborhood Planning Assembly, City of Burlington, as passed by the Ward 1 NPA at their March 2024 meeting. I know we have representatives here this evening from the Ward 1 NPA Steering Committee, but Councilor Newbeezer, could I turn to you first for a motion on this, and then would be happy to give you the floor back upon a second, and then if there are folks here that would like to speak to it, then happy to bring them forward after a motion.
And hopefully I'll get this right. So I move to refer the resolution from the Ward 1 MPA Planning Assembly concerning the relationship between city officials and the MPA to the Community Development and Neighborhood Revitalization Committee for further review and recommended action.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Is there a second to that motion?
Sure.
Second by Councilor Bergman. Thank you. So Councilor Newbeezer, would you like a floor back now?
Yeah, and I think we have someone to speak to it as well. But I just want to say I think this is the start of a conversation. The intent, as I've communicated to folks on the council, is to hopefully refer this to CDNR to really flesh out and have a good public process and public discussion around how can we strengthen the role of neighborhood planning assemblies, which are so key to the democratic process in our city and also are a key part of what makes Burlington Burlington. And so how can we strengthen the relationship between the decisions we're making here and making sure that average people going about their daily lives can engage in those decisions more productively and more proactively earlier on. So I think that's the intent of this. I'm excited to get to work on it and see what we can come up with. And I'll just say too, I'm a big advocate of, in principle, direct democracy and citizen participation. And I view my role as a city councilor, and the big reason I ran was to hopefully do my best to represent the will of the vast majority of my ward. And so having, not just participation, but an MPA actually writing a resolution, I think is what democracy is all about and civic engagement is all about. So I do really deeply appreciate it. I'm biased because I was on the Ward 1 MPA and I love my ward, but I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councilor Newbeezer. I do know that we have folks here from the Ward 1 NPA Steering Committee. I didn't know if you wanted to speak any further to it. You've been patient, so.
Sure, thank you. My name's Jonathan Chappell-Sokol. I live on North Prospect Street in Ward 1, and I'm on the steering committee. I got a thing I can say, but I don't need to. I mean, you all want to go home too. So it's entirely, I'm here at your.
No, I had indicated to you beforehand. So please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really what I can do is just provide a little context. To begin with, I'm going to read this because it'll be faster. I received Ward 1 NPA's consent to read the proposal at public forum. We never discussed it as a deliberative agenda item, so I'm speaking here for myself. I want to start by saying that. I may lapse into first person plural, but please treat that as more impressionistic or royal than actually formal collective opinion. But I don't think I'm alone in having an unclear idea of the relationship between NPAs and the City Council. I drafted the proposal we're discussing, and Lena Greenberg improved it. Ward 1 and Wards 2, 3 approved the content of it, and others may have as well. I just don't know. And it has been discussed at the all wards meetings. The primary inspiration for the proposal came from City Council's decision last October to pass a resolution that prescribed specific actions required by the NPAs. I could well be wrong, but I think this was unconventional and largely unprecedented. It was notable that the City Council was placing demands on the NPAs beyond, of course, specifying the use of the restricted grants that the city allocates to NPAs. We understand that. But more surprising was that the City Council resolution was raised and passed without formal consultation with the NPAs. It came as a surprise. I think we all understood the gravity of the situation that motivated Council's behavior, but what we didn't understand was the urgency. Why would City Council make rules about NPAs without talking to the NPAs, talking with the NPAs first? Around the same time, UVM came to City Council proposing a new draft MOU relating to property development. This is an issue very close to the hearts of residents of Ward 1. We talked with our councilors, but I, for one, did not have any confidence that Council wouldn't vote on it before any formal consultation with community members could happen. And so Ward 1 brought a request to City Council in December requesting a 45-day hold on any substantive votes on the MOU to give the city officials time to consult with NPAs. And I don't think there have been any substantive votes on it since then, but our request was respected. But what became clear, it became clear that beyond developers ticking off a box when they want to develop, which they all come to NPAs for, there's really no standards setting conditions under which NPAs should be engaged for input in city decision making. Hence, the proposal asks the city to work with NPAs to establish conditions under which elected officials or city administrators seek and consider input from the NPAs as one might an advisory group. This isn't really a very radical suggestion. The original establishing resolution for NPAs says, this council, this is the old council, this council and various city commissions could be much assisted if the views of the general public with respect to the needs of the city could be communicated to it in a regular and orderly fashion. Many positive benefits would result from the creation of neighborhood assemblies at which citizens would consider the issues facing government and make recommendations for the consideration of appointed and elected officials charged with the responsibility of implementing city policies. And in the judgment of this City Council, an appropriate and effective means of realizing such goals would be through creation of NPAs in each ward of the city, which would meet on a regular basis and provide advice to appointed and elected officials with respect to the issues facing the neighborhoods and the city. It's clear that the founders thought NPAs would be a way to help Burlington City Council make better decisions. NPA members still think this, if there is as long as there's a well-defined relationship between NPAs and City Council. Certainly, something like this will make the NPAs better too. There's no question about that. But what we read in the founding resolution was the NPAs were a way to make City Council better. Of course, today there's many more ways for councilors to get input than there were 40 years ago. You're probably all getting texts right now from residents. NPA members, but the NPA is our town meeting. I've heard city councilors refer to it as a town meeting, where an official can connect and consult with a gathering of neighbors is still superior to any other ways. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you and your fellow steering committee members for your work on this. Do any councilors want to speak or ask any questions on this item? Yeah, Councilor McKnight.
Thank you. So first I want to say I'm excited about any opportunity to strengthen democracy through engagement and to increase collaboration. And I really enjoy attending my NPA meetings in Ward 6. I learn a lot there, and it's a really important forum for our community. However, as the only mom with school-aged kids serving on this body, I feel like I need to flag what I think is going to be really important as we go to consider this in committee. I want to just be sure that we're really careful not to onerously add new responsibilities and or recurring evening meetings to counselors' plates This is already an extremely time-consuming role, and when I speak with folks that, other women who are my peers, the time commitment and concerns about that are the number one barrier that folks face to serving, whether it be on the MPA or choosing to run for city council. So I have a fear that this initiative that I think sounds like a really valiant effort to improve our government, if implemented in the wrong way, could have the unintended consequence of making serving as a counselor even less accessible to thousands of people who live in this city. So I would just ask that we handle with care and give some thought to the requirements that we're putting into place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Any other councilors? Councilor Shannon?
Thank you, President Travers. I agree with everything that Councilor McKnight said, but also would note that we kind of partially made a change in this direction some years ago when we required certain planning projects to go before the NPA, which I think has been very helpful. It has not put any burden on counselors. It has put some burden on the planning staff. And so I just ask that the committee, when you're considering this, give consideration to who is presenting to the NPAs, and that somebody will have to, either counselors or staff, and give, as Councilor McKnight said, give consideration to the burden of that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Any other councilors want to speak to this? Councilor Broderick.
Building off of the last on Councilor Shannon and Councilor McKnight, I think with the implementation of such a resolution and in the CDNR committee, it also should be considering continuing to push our MPAs to become more accessible and more inclusive to everyone in Burlington, regardless of ward. I'm thinking of New Americans with different languages for documents, and again, adjusting our schedule to account for people with new families and young children, students, people with full-time jobs. Just doing everything we can, especially with this increased role that this proposal is asking for, that we're making sure that our MPAs are accessible and inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Any other councilors? Otherwise, why don't I go to Councilor Grant first, and then I'll go back to you, Councilor Newbeezer, for last word. Okay, Councilor Grant.
Thank you. So I'm a big fan, a big proponent of NPAs. I guess my NPA is the absolute bare minimum that I need to be doing in terms of getting out and really talking to people. Our MPAs are really different. I'm someone who goes and visits other MPAs. I've been to NPAs where I'm very welcome. I've been to MPAs where I wasn't welcome. And I definitely appreciate the sense of urgency that was created when there was an issue around multiple incidents of bigotry, and just something went over the top. It's been discussed. I understand the pressure that it put on our NPAs and the feeling that they weren't fully included. I find that very regretful, but at the same time, given the urgency of the situation, which had gotten out of control, I'm not sure I would have done things differently in terms of the changes that I've advocated. I do see a huge improvement in that particular NPA. I see better attendance. I see more diverse backgrounds of people, different ages of people attending. And I think how NPAs work would determine, like when I think about the Ward 2-3, we just have this fabulous community dinner that we start out with. And so we have families, and then we have toys and things to draw with for the children. So it's a real experience for people to bring their children to the dinner, and people sometimes stay for the meeting with their children, and there's things to keep the children occupied, and there's people to help with the children. So I think that that is also part of it, and that maybe different MPAs need to look at that. And yeah, we kind of are locked down in these weekday um, schedules. Maybe NPAs are once a month community breakfast as opposed to a community dinner, and it's a weekend day, depending on the NPA and what the NPA thinks, how the NPA thinks that will help expand the number of people that come and participate in the NPA. I think for members of the community, the bare minimum is to watch your NPA for things that are being brought to the NPAs in order to get the word out about different things. I know, for example, a lot of people felt like neighborhood code was something that wasn't really talked about, when in fact there were several presentations. Our MPA got multiple presentations. I know other MPAs got multiple presentations in addition to other meetings and a separate website, etc. So I think that, people using MPAs and front porch forum as a bare minimum is really important. So I definitely support this, and I appreciate everything that was said in the presentation, and continue to look forward to working with my MPAs and visiting others. Thank you.
We'll turn back to Councilor Newbeezer and then try to go to a vote.
Well, yeah, I just appreciate all the comments, and I think Councilor McKnight and Shannon and others, all points well taken and important points to be made. I think, I've got a 3-year-old at home. I've got a newborn probably come October 7th, give or take a couple days. I had to remember there. And so, or weeks rather, yeah, sorry. But ultimately, these are projects that we can work on. We can give more resources to MPAs, more guidance around some of these structural equity pieces, and at the same time, I think fundamentally what we've seen in Ward 1, and I think what's worked over engagement, not to speak too boldly for the whole MPA and Ward, but we need to give people real decision-making power and real input that's binding in ways that are reasonable, that are measured, and that are effective given current structures, absolutely. But that's how we're going to increase engagement. And of course, there's so many logistic pieces, and that's why we want to take it slow and refer this committee and hopefully get more input from as many stakeholders as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. If there are no other comments, then we will go to a vote. The motion is to refer the Ward 1 NPA's resolution to the CDNR committee. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer, and again, thank you, Jonathan, for being here.
Thank you.
There are 2 additional items on our deliberative agenda. We have moved what was originally posted as 6.8 to now item 6.7. This is the proposed zoning amendment 2404 Neighborhood Code Part 2 topics. On this item, we do have Director Tuttle online, I believe. This item was on the consent agenda, but at the request of Councilor Grant has been placed on the deliberative agenda, and Director Tuttle would appreciate if we could turn the floor to you, providing the council with an update on the memo that's been posted online.
All right. Thank you, President Traverse. And hello to all the counselors, particularly the new counselors who I have not had the opportunity to present yet. Welcome. I'm going to move very quickly through this presentation that has been posted to Civic Clerk in companion to the memo that we shared with you. Most of this repeats what's in the memo, and I just want to hit some of the highlights. The Part 2 neighborhood code work is following the work that the previous City Council adopted at the end of March on purpose. when we were working as a joint committee, we had identified a need to bifurcate some of these topics and move forward the core concepts of the neighborhood code to both ensure that the committee could dedicate adequate time to discussing them, and also to make sure that those core concepts were going to earn the support of the city council before we spent a lot of time in the weeds on a number of related issues. So part 2 comes back and completes the work that we had anticipated coming out of that joint committee process, really helps us to move forward with a number of what we were calling related issues. But it also helps us make space to discuss things that we heard during the public input on the part 1 work, and particularly in the hearings that the council held as they considered adoption of that, and also helps us answer some inquiries that followed the adoption of the neighborhood code in March. We anticipate that what we're calling part 2 will actually be a series of work, a series of amendments, a series of other planning projects that both the Planning Commission, City Council, and our office will be engaging with the community around over several months, which I'll talk about here in just a second. And we do anticipate that this work will begin with the Planning Commission at their next meeting later actually next week. This slide here summarizes what is in the memo in one image. I apologize, I didn't realize my slides weren't in the full screen. Just relating the work that was part of the package of ordinance amendments that were adopted by the City Council back in March to the series of zoning amendments that we anticipate. Really everything that's outlined in a blue box here on the screen are the issues that either have been or will be discussed as a zoning amendment. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a second. The other issues that are outlined in orange at the bottom of the screen are other relevant topics and discussions that may eventually help inform zoning amendments, but in the short term need to be discussed in a broader planning effort or in collaboration with other departments to make sure that we're properly informing any future zoning amendments. So you'll see first these sets of zoning amendment topics that will be referred to the City Council, probably in at least 4, maybe more packages of zoning amendments as the Planning Commission finishes those. And some of these bigger, meatier topics will take on in broader planning processes. I'm going to skip ahead because the next several slides just outline what those packages of zoning amendments will include, and I'm happy to answer any questions about them. They were in the memo, so I won't speak at length about them. But I do want to talk about these related topics because some of them came up even in a couple of the public forum comments you heard. Over the process of the joint committee's work, and definitely in the public hearings by the city in front of the City Council last month, we heard a lot of questions that were touching on related issues that were not necessarily directly in the scope of the neighborhood code, and in some cases are not directly zoning related issues. For several years now, our office has been preparing to start work on several broader community planning efforts relating to historic preservation and really citywide considerations of our historic resources and the standards for regulating them. We've been preparing to take on a neighborhood plan. Somebody mentioned in the public forum that we were going to be spending 18 months on zoning changes for the new North End. We're actually going to be spending quite a bit of time on a whole neighborhood plan for the new North End, similar to Plan BTV Downtown or Plan BTV South End that we did in the last decade. And we're also going to be collaborating with a number of other departments to update our open space protection plan and our urban tree canopy management plan. Each of these plans provides an opportunity for us to pull up some of the topics that were brought up during the neighborhood code process and make sure that we're considering them holistically within these community planning efforts. There are other issues that may relate to zoning or other city ordinance changes in the future, but which require our collaboration with other departments and possibly other City Council committees before we can make recommendations on them. We've heard a lot of discussion, and I know I've talked to many of the city councilors about stormwater and how stormwater is regulated. This is a specific one that while there were no specific recommended changes to how we regulate stormwater in zoning, we have been having a conversation with DPW about potential improvements to how the city's standalone stormwater management ordinance works today. In particular, talking with DPW about whether there are different models where instead of regulating stormwater management at individual site levels, if there could be opportunities to improve that process on a more holistic level. We've also been talking, the planning office, CEDO, and recently the Planning Commission have been talking about some potential changes to the city's inclusionary zoning ordinance. For those councilors that are unfamiliar, this is often a term that's used interchangeably with permanently affordable housing. This is an ordinance that we already have on the books that requires a certain percentage of housing to be permanently affordable anytime there's a building that has 5 units or more. So we have started the conversation about some potential changes. There was a resolution from the previous council asking us to look at some other details, particularly related to the payments in lieu of providing those units. And we expect that some of the questions that came up in the community about how this rule, these zoning rules about inclusionary housing apply in the neighborhood code should be taken up in the context of those broader discussions. And finally, we've heard a lot of interest in how the neighborhood code could help us to promote particularly homeownership and how we might resolve some of the issues that we know exist outside the issues in the neighborhood code to actually building housing and how feasible creating housing at this scale can be. This is something we've talked at length about. The neighborhood code at its core is trying to help us resolve some of the issues that can prevent the creation of new housing types that might be able to be owner occupied, especially in a city like Burlington. When we think about the limits of the land area and being a built out city, regulations that help us get more townhouses or individually owned duplexes and the land under them, or creative options for how existing lots can be subdivided to create a new developable lot. These are the kinds of core issues that the neighborhood code and that zoning standards can help us address. But many of the other issues that people have been asking us about, such as incentives to help support homeownership, whether that's funding or other policies, technical assistance to actually help people build these homes, making some movement on our condo conversion ordinance, things like this. These are all details that require us to really dig into city policies and programs outside of the zoning ordinance and collaborate with CEDO and the CD&R committee and other council committees as well. So I share all that just to make sure that folks know, even though some of these issues are not directly zoning related issues, we have heard them and we have been talking about ways that our future planning processes and other interdepartmental collaborations can help us have a forum to address those topics. We anticipate that the group of zoning topics that we've been calling Part 2A, which relates to secondary structures and the rules around secondary structures, planned unit developments, and some technical corrections to the ordinance, are things that the Planning Commission will begin discussing at their meeting next week, and will ultimately move through the process to the City Council over the summer or fall in anticipation of the portion of the neighborhood code that relates to secondary structures going into effect on October 1. We also did receive a report, or a request for a report, which is a great request, that we come back to the City Council in November to report on the first 6 months of implementation of this new policy. Specifically, we heard some interest in things like the number of applications that have been submitted under this code, the number of projects that are in construction, and the number of units that have been added. I'll note for a new policy like this, 6 months is not an incredibly long time for us to have a lot to report, particularly on construction and new units created. But we can definitely come back to the city council, especially as we're just starting to see the allowance for secondary structures coming into effect, and report on inquiries that we're hearing, formal applications that have been submitted, and other issues related to moving forward with part 2 of the neighborhood code. For those counselors who have never been through a zoning amendment process, I just wanted to wrap up here by noting that unlike other city ordinances and resolutions, the process to amend and adopt zoning ordinances in Burlington are regulated both by the city's rules and procedures as well as state law. So the process that we use here in Burlington is kind of a hybrid of those two, but is heavily influenced by the requirements of state statute in terms of where the jurisdiction lies in different city commissions for considering zoning changes. Many zoning amendments, actually most zoning amendments, originate with the staff in some way. This can be an effort to implement a plan, a neighborhood plan or other community plan, an effort to address a major city priority, to bring forward a request that we've heard from an outside entity. You know, a business wants to open somewhere, but they're running into the barrier that zoning doesn't allow that use in a certain location. We have lots of different ways that these zoning amendments originate, but they usually are introduced to the Planning Commission originally by the staff. We've had a few examples, really can think of maybe 1 or 2 in the last almost decade of zoning amendments that originate directly from City Council, but that can happen. Regardless of their origin, though, all zoning amendments first go through the Planning Commission to review the substance of the issue and hold a public hearing, and then ultimately make a recommendation to the City Council on that policy. The City Council then also typically receives that recommendation, refers it to its ordinance committee, and then holds its own public hearing before it considers adoption of an amendment. So there's a simple flow chart here at the bottom that's from our website that outlines the zoning amendment process. And I also shared a link here in the slides where you can read a little bit more about our zoning amendment process and where we post any active zoning amendments that are currently under consideration by either the Planning Commission or the City Council. And then finally, related to the request to report on this policy in particular, I thought that the council may also be interested in knowing that our office also helps maintain a website that's called BTV Stat. This provides critical indicators and other long-form reports about major issues that are happening, that are affecting Burlington, one of which is housing. So for a little over a year now, this site has been live with some key indicators around the creation of new homes and the cost of new homes in Burlington, as well as an annual report that helps us dig into some of our big housing topics in a more detailed way. So the screenshot that you see here is actually a chart showing new homes being created in the city since 1980 and what type of building they were created within. I think this is something that really relates to information that we'll want to keep track of as we report to you in the future about the implementation of the neighborhood code. So just again, wanted to share this as a piece of background information for you right now. And with that, President Traverse, I'll wrap up my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any counselors might have about what was in the memo.
Thank you, Director Tuttle, for that great presentation, including the outline with respect to next steps. I think we understand that a number of these, at least zoning-related changes, will have their day still in front of the Planning Commission, and then again before the Council and our Ordinance Committee. But that said, are there any counselors at this point that have any questions or comments for Director Tuttle? Councilor Newbeezer.
Potentially a question for the director, potentially for other counselors. I'm wondering, I know that Council President Traverse, you just mentioned that the resolution would move through ordinance. Has this ordinance in the past neighborhood code moved through CDNR? And is there interest in including CDNR in that overall process as well?
I think, I mean, Director Tuttle, you may be able to speak to it, but I think I can speak to it as well, because the zoning amendments are amendments to our comprehensive development ordinance. The ordinance committee is the committee of jurisdiction, but Director Tuttle, you can speak to whether or not any other committees of the council have historically weighed in on, in your experience, proposed zoning amendments.
In the time that I've been with the city, I can think of maybe one example where multiple council committees worked on planning efforts that resulted in zoning changes. Back in 2018, 2019, there was a broad joint effort to work on changes to the inclusionary zoning ordinance. That was a huge lift and also required stakeholders on that committee. That may be one of the examples I can think of where a zoning amendment was really considered by another council committee. But that said, I think sometimes counselors that are on other committees participate in ordinance committee meetings and are able to share input on those issues as the ordinance committee takes them up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McKnight?
Turn on the microphone. Thank you, Megan. Director Tuttle, that was a great presentation and really helpful to see it all laid out like that. My question is mostly about the items that require a cross-department collaboration. That seems like a lot to manage, and I was just wondering if you could speak to, the plan to manage that collaboration, and maybe if there are past examples of where that's happened. Just want to give the public and ourselves some sense of what to expect in terms of that process for dealing with something like stormwater and making sure all the right people are at the table.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor McKnight. That is a great question, and you are correct that in a lot of cases, those issues that are on the list of cross-departmental collaborations are big issues. One example that I can share where this has happened is our work on adopting a short-term rental policy. That is an example where we started the conversation at the Planning Commission and Joint Ordinance Committee level about what we wanted to do to regulate short-term rentals. And as we got further into that discussion, we realized that the best home for that policy actually did not live in the zoning ordinance, but rather in our minimum housing code ordinance. So that required collaboration with the Department of Permitting and Inspections to make sure that, and the City Attorney's Office to make sure that we were actually getting the policy into the right place within our ordinance. And then another piece of that policy was a request by the City Council that we start a new fee that would go along with short-term rental activity. So again, that required coordination with the City Attorney's Office to amend the part of the city's code of ordinances that relates to the regulation of hotels and lodging, and collaboration with the clerk's office to ensure that we had the right procedures in place to collect the fee and make sure that it was being directed at the Housing Trust Fund that CEDO manages. So it's kind of a long answer, but it just demonstrates that sometimes these policy goals, especially when it relates to things like incentivizing homeownership or carrying out different programs that relate to the policies we're putting in place, do really require a lot of coordination. And I would say that process probably took a year plus for us to implement. Some of this will be impacted by the capacity of different departments to be able to participate in discussions about these issues, given their workload on other pressing needs. And also will be affected by just what capacity the city actually has to influence certain aspects of the related issues. Homeownership in particular and incentives around homeownership can be a really difficult topic, especially if the city doesn't have direct funding that can help support that. So some of this collaboration is about learning more about where the city might even have influence and what we could do to support those efforts.
Okay, thank you. Council President Travers, I was wondering if I could ask Mayor Mulvaney Stanek a question.
I think it would be appropriate. Yeah, you could certainly ask. Whether or not she answers is up to her.
Thank you. Just continuing on that path, I was curious, Madam Mayor, if you have thoughts or plans on how your office is either going to encourage or follow up on interdepartmental work like this. So it can be so difficult to get different silos together on big citywide issues. So just curious to hear your thoughts there.
Well, I'll be very brief, Councilor McKnight, because as you might assume, we're deep in the budget at the moment. But even through the budget process, it's been interesting as a new mayor to look at opportunities for more cross-department collaboration, strategy, thinking along those lines. So it's a good, I wouldn't say it's a trial run because we're doing really important work and asking questions across departments for the sake of the budget. I can imagine this would, anything I learn and certainly the things that we learn amongst the community of department heads would certainly apply to something like this going forward. I also just have to commend, and I wish she wasn't leaving, Director Tuttle has offered a lot of insights on ways that our city overall could really function more efficiently. And this operational study that we'll be getting back as part of the budget also has a lot of really interesting organizational suggestions within it, which is not a 2-month job or 1-month consideration and then apply July 1st. But I think this is really a roadmap for the next couple years, which I mentioned because I think there's some bigger structural considerations within there that would make something like this a little more logical in many ways.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor McKnight. City Attorney McNeil.
Just one observation historically. There is a bit of a difference between the way laws or regulations migrate through the Vermont legislature and the way they have typically migrated through the city of Burlington. In the legislature, it tends to be more of a traveling roadshow where a bill is introduced to the major body, is referred to a committee, and then its journey may involve 3 or 4 different committees before ultimately there's a report back. City hasn't operated that way historically. The city's initial committee of jurisdiction has developed the questions that need to be considered and answered before there is confidence that the measure is passage-worthy. And so what will happen, for example, is if the ordinance committee has the measure and there's a DPW impact or there's a fire department impact, those departments will be called into the ordinance committee so that as a single source of consideration, there's more economy and efficiency than would be the case with what I would call the traveling roadshow through committees. That's been historic. Obviously, you're looking more generically about how the city could operate more effectively, but that's been a fairly effective methodology.
Thank you, Attorney McNeil. Any other councilors have questions or comments for Director Tuttle? Okay, seeing none. Let me just confirm online here. Okay, Councilor Grant, sorry. I thought I can only see Director Tuttle up on the screen, so I had to bring you back up on my computer. So go ahead.
No worries. I really want to thank Director Tuttle for the work that she's done for the city. It's been really important, and I appreciate your responsiveness with regards to a whole lot of questions that you've been asked around this process, and your patience with people. That is really to be commended, because that, quite frankly, is not easy for everybody. You know, when you try to put some of these more complicated issues in lay terms that the average person can kind of embrace and understand. And I appreciate that reminder about the data, because sometimes we forget to look there for that. And I just wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant.
And I echo that as well, Director Tuttle. Thank you very much for all your work. We'll try to get you back before the council one more time before you head off to Madison, but it'll be a big loss. Councilor Grant, could I ask you to make the motion to waive the reading, accept the communication, and place it on file?
Yes, I make the motion to accept the reading of the document and place it on file.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilor Carpenter. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much again, Director Tuttle.
Thank you.
That brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is now item 6.8, a resolution negotiations between the Vermont Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals and the University of Vermont Medical Center. Before turning to that item, I will mention that Section 133 of our charter provides that city officers may not participate or vote on any question in which such participation or vote would reasonably create in the mind of an objective person the appearance of a direct or indirect conflict of interest. My day job is as an employee for the University of Vermont Medical Center, and so I must recuse myself on this item, and will be turning the gavel to Councilor Shannon for the purposes of moving forward on this item. Before doing that, though, my understanding is there may be some other councilors that have a conflict on this matter. Councilor Doherty, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too will be recusing myself from consideration of this item.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Doherty. And Councilor McKnight?
Yes, I will need to recuse myself from this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, Councilor Shannon, I will turn the gavel to you.
Thank you, President Travers. I do not have I'm not on the Zoom, so if maybe Director Shad can alert me if there's somebody who. So is there a motion, Councilor Newbeezer, on this item?
Yeah, I'd move to waive the reading, adopt the resolution, and ask for the floor back. After a second.
Seconded by Councilor Broderick. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I won't take up too much time. I really want to hear from Deb Snell, who is an amazing organizer and union leader, and I appreciate you all waiting so long into the night to speak. But I think our intention as a caucus introducing this resolution is to show that the city has the backs of workers unequivocally, particularly when we are talking about working people negotiating with an organization worth $2 billion, or running a $2 billion annual budget, I should say. Championing labor causes and making sure that, I'll use the word, making sure that I'm a staunch labor advocate on this council is something I ran on. It's something I've worked on since I've been politically involved, and it's something I plan to continue to do. So with that, I wonder, Deb, if you can give us a little bit of context to what's happening with negotiations, and also, yeah, just speak to sort of what's happening in the hospital and what your asks are.
Oh, good evening, and thank you for the chance to address you.
Yes, if you could just go through the council president and identify yourself. Thanks.
Yes. My name is Deb Snell. I am a nurse at the UVM Medical Center for the last almost 25 years now. I've spent 21 years in the medical intensive care unit. I am also president of the Vermont Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals.
Thank you. And you wanted Ms. Snell to speak on this item?
Yes, please, yeah, and apologies for jumping the gun.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I was a little honestly not planning on being here this evening until I heard that there were some questions perhaps arising from the resolution that I would like the opportunity to address with you. And I apologize, my allergies are really acting up tonight. So anyway, we started bargaining with the hospital about a month ago. And we have presented to the city council some of our concerns with the UVM Medical Center. As many of the people stated here earlier, it's a great place to work. I love my colleagues. I love the work I do. My unit was where the sickest patients came during COVID, so I was front and center during that. So I saw how hard everybody worked and how hard everybody pulled together to help patients survive. That being said, we don't feel the respect from the medical center that we feel that we deserve. And in this resolution, there were a number of questions that the UVM Medical Center brought up, and I just wanted the chance to address and answer those with you. In the resolution, and I don't know if you have copies of the resolution in front of you, okay. In their question under the number 1, they questioned about whether they were truly one of the most expensive hospitals in the country. This is data that we actually received from the Green Mountain Care Board during their budget deliberations. This is the CMI adjusted, so the Center for Medicaid, adjusted average cost per Medicare discharge per the Association of the American Medical College Hospital ranks UVMMC in the 83rd percentile. So that is where we're getting that information from. In number 2, in the Green Mountain Care Board deliberations, it was not made clear that when we said that they were in this percentile, that they were including all of their numbers to be part of the network, not as UVMMC. The data provided from the Green Mountain Care Board imply that these numbers were, in fact, for UVMMC, not including the entirety of the network. In number 3, we don't understand why they're disputing this data. We have several examples that we provided to the hospital as far as cost of living in cities with similar size academic medical centers. We even have further examples that we can offer them. In fact, last August, and it is published on the Green Mountain Care Board site, they requested I do a presentation for them on the state of nursing in Vermont. And during that presentation, I brought the same data to them. I showed them how in Oregon Health Science University in Portland, Oregon, similar cost of living within 3 to 5%. In fact, we were actually a little more expensive, and their nurses at that time were starting at $7 an hour more than a nurse here at the UVM Medical Center. 2 months after that, they settled a new contract, and they now make $10 to $12 an hour more with similar cost of living. So at that point in time, the hospital did not challenge that. In fact, I can tell you, Steve Leffler personally thanked me for providing that data to the Green Mountain Care Board because he thought that it gave them a better leg up in potentially getting their budget passed. In number 4, the information that was in this resolution was actually acquired from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies that also include other major, in fact, I do have the list here, sorry. I lied, I don't have it in front of me. Oh wait, I do. This data also came from the National Association of Realtors and Forbes Cost of Living Calculator and the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis Economic Research Department. The one thing we do stand corrected on is that we said that there is a 12% increase for nurses at UVMMC. That was incorrect. It's actually nurses in Burlington, Vermont. So that would include other like nursing homes or smaller hospitals or smaller clinics in the city of the Burlington. So in
Could I ask-
number 5, the hospital is now claiming the average nurse at UVMMC is making $83,304. So last week, the hospital claimed that the average nurse's base pay was $94,000. I would challenge that both of those numbers are probably incorrect. I would challenge that anyone here would able to get a loan for a home over $400,000 on an income of $83,000 before taxes. And number
If you
6,
could wrap up your comments.
I'm sorry. For number 6, by their own certificate of need submission to the Green Mountain Care Board, it would be 2029 before they could expand to 12 operating rooms in regards to the outpatient surgical center. However, they are right. It does not say in the certificate of need about the number of nurses required. However, I would invite anyone to go to the YouTube and watch the Green Mountain Care Board channel where Dr. Leffler, during the deliberations on the outpatient surgery center, clearly makes this statement and also admits that they will need to hire up to 140 travel nurses to backfill these positions. UVMMC indicated a presentation on May 1st that the hospital had only gained 70 nurses since 2022. UVMC Housing is increasing the rent for a simple studio apartment. It is over $1,500 a month, and the vacancy rate has grown. In fact, due to the joint staffing collaboration between VFNHP and UVMC, that created over 70 new positions. And this came after a third party recognized that many of our units were working short-staffed.
Okay, thank you. So we've only allotted another 6 minutes on this item, and I think other counselors wanted to speak, but are you set? Okay. Sir, yes, Counselor Carpenter.
Thank you. And I do so appreciate this being brought to our attention and the work to date that's been put into this by Councilor Newbeeser and others. Sadly, as someone who has supported the previous resolutions, I think this particular resolution, both in timing and context, is different than the ones that we've, at least the 2 that I recall in the past. And I just want to speak to that right now. The resolution as a whole, I really generally support. It asks that the city encourage UVM to negotiate a contract that provides employees with salaries and benefits that are comparable to other hospitals. And I would welcome that, and I think we need to do that, and we need to get that data. It also asks that the city express our appreciation for the critical service that you all offer and to all of our community. As a lifelong Burlingtonian and someone who has actually done work at the hospital in the past, we need to more vehemently express our appreciation. I would hope all of us are unequivocal in our support for the UVM nurses and those statements. The resolution also asks that we recognize that when workers' wages are increased, our local economy is strengthened, and that we all benefit from union labor. I hope we all recognize that for all workers in Burlington. However, the concern I have about this particular resolution as written is that the main resolve in it, which is something different than we've done in the past, asks us to take a specific position on a labor negotiation that none of us know little about. Just today we received varied information. We've had this before us for only a couple of weeks. I know none of the details of the negotiation, where you are specifically, what is being asked for, what is being given or not given. And then, as I said, we've received varying information. You walk through it, you have one opinion, the University Medical Center has another set of data. Somehow that needs to be reconciled in some kind of thoughtful forum, which we've not had. And to be honest, the city's not party to these negotiations, so I'm not sure what our role is related to the specifics of that. I mean, I see my role as a city councilor is to support my constituents, our partners, make sure we have all the facts, make sure that we're prepared in the future if there's some kind of split in the process. Usually we've entered an opinion when it's farther down in the bargaining process, when there appears to be more division, and I'm not understanding where we're at with that. And I do appreciate the information that you put in around the ability of nurses to purchase a home or rent in Burlington. I would say, sadly, that is true with every single worker in this city, both nurses and non-nurses at UVM, and pick a department. We have a fundamental housing problem, an incredibly tight market, and it's not having to do with any one worker's salaries. Our business as a council, and I say this often, the state of Vermont, we need to fix that, but I'm not sure this negotiation is the best forum for that. So I guess I want to offer, in light of the very recent information that we've received from the university, and my concerns about this maybe being premature, that I feel we need more discussion on it. As I said, 4 of the resolve clause, I think we all very strongly support, but there's whereases and other issues within the resolution as written that we're not together on, and I want us to get to yes. So what I want to do right now is move to postpone the consideration of this resolution until our May 20th council meeting, so that we really can allow for time for all of us to get together and come up with something that adequately supports the nurses as they need to be and expresses what our role as a city councilor should be and will be.
Sorry, there's a motion to postpone. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Litwin. Is there discussion on the motion to postpone, which would be limited to the motion to postpone, not on the merits of the underlying? Councilor Bergman?
Well, let me just speak in opposition to that. The time is now as well as any time. We stood very, very clearly on the side of the support staff. You do not need, in fact, it is really, in my mind, a bad habit to wait until there's an impasse. That is clearly a time when people are going to say, whoa, don't take sides here. This is a recipe to not be on the side of the workers. I know the question being asked is, which side am I on? I'm on the side of the union. I will vote against this, and I urge my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you. Councilor Broderick.
I second Councilor Bergman's comments. I think it is within the scope of the council's duties to support labor and support the workers of our city, regardless if they work for the city or not. Workers run this city, and I think we need to do everything in our power to support, whether it's through words, whatever, just to support increasing the material needs and accommodating for the workers of this city. Thank you.
Anyone else on the motion to postpone? Councilor Newbeezer.
Yeah, I would just say, fundamentally, there, as Councilor Carpenter alluded to, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness around, there are 2 separate versions, right? There is a group of workers who have spent months researching, citing, sourcing, and diligently coming up with thoughtful proposals to engage in good faith with one of the largest, if not the largest, institution in our city, which again is a $2 billion annual budget, which I don't think people fully appreciate how much
Please
power.
keep your comments to the motion to postpone.
I think they do, but I will make sure to do that moving forward. There's no reason to postpone because, we're not going to rectify those visions as a council. Our role as a council is to make sure that folks know that we value raising wages as an affordability measure and value workers first. And so that's why I hope that we'll vote against this, but ultimately pass the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, Acting President Shannon. I think there is a reason to postpone, and the reason would be to build greater council consensus on this. When we had the UVMMC support resolution, I think everybody who was at this table, even some of, maybe not the folks who were accused, but we supported that because we worked on it and came up with language that was acceptable to everybody, and it was a balanced resolution. And so that would be my reason for supporting the motion to postpone, is to give us more time to build consensus on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just, sorry, I realize I'm on Zoom here.
Yep.
I would just like to add, thank you, Councilor Barlow. That's exactly what I was thinking as well, because, and I just want to clarify, you know, what I heard Councilor Carpenter saying was that there are councilors like myself who want to be able to vote yes on this. And so I am pro-labor, I am pro-nurse. I am grateful for the service that they've done, especially throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, you know, postponing allows us to, again, like Councilor Barlow said, get to a point where we can be unified and hopefully pass this unanimously, or at least with more support. And I just don't want there to be a misunderstanding that if folks vote no, that it's that they're not supportive of nurses, but rather me personally, I want to make sure that the facts are correct in anything that I'm voting yes on. And we have evidence from both parties that are in direct conflict with each other. And I think just asking for 2 additional weeks to work that out isn't unreasonable. And so I would hope that folks could support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Councilor Carpenter, was your motion to postpone to a date certain?
Yes, to the next meeting,
Okay,
May 20th.
thank you. And Councilor Grant, did you want to speak?
Um,
I'm sorry, I thought I saw you waving your hand, but
No, I disagree with a motion to postpone. Thank you.
I think everybody's spoken on the motion to postpone, so we'll go to vote. All those in, I think we may need a roll call. Thank you.
Councilor Barlow?
Yes.
Councilor Bergman?
No.
Councilor Broderick?
No.
Councilor Carpenter?
Yes.
Councilor Grant?
No.
Councilor Kane?
No.
Councilor Litwin?
Yes.
Councilor Newbeezer?
No.
Acting City Council President Shannon?
Yes.
4 ayes, 5 nays, 3 recusals.
So that motion fails. And we go back to the main motion. Is there anybody who would like to speak to the main motion? Councilor Broderick was actually in the queue to speak to the main motion. Do you still want to speak?
No, I think my point got across talking about the previous motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Bergman.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. You know, this is, as Councilor Carpenter said, a pretty simple resolution. It says that we support the nurses in your contract negotiations. Pretty straightforward and simply. Says that we encourage UVMMC to negotiate a fair contract with employees on salaries and benefits. And it focuses on comparability in cities that have a similar cost of living. Totally fair. And later on, it talks about how important that is to all workers here. So, you know, an injury to one is an injury to all, and the help of one is a help for us all. It expresses deep appreciation for all of the work. And it asks that we send this to the administration. I really don't know how much more simple and how much more unity you could get if you support the union. You know, support is really important for our support, but it's not a guarantee that there'll be a success. There are negotiations. I sat here in 1990 as a counselor, but also as a representative of the union negotiating team for the Burlington Free Press against a greedy Gannett company, and we did not succeed. But it was very important that this body stood with workers, and it did then. But it is really, really clear that it's important. That's why people came. People aren't showing up if it's not important to them. We heard about safety, about wages, about disparities with both administrators and executives and the traveling nurses. Those are all basic reasons. You don't need actually the litany that's in there to defend why we would get to the resolve clauses. So let me just end by saying that in 2018, I came to this council on June 30th, actually, to thank, I'll say you all, including Councillor Shannon, for appointing me for 20 straight years as your assistant city attorney, senior assistant for 9 of them, and to ask you to join me on the next coming Wednesday on the nurses' picket line. And I spent that weekend in community solidarity support with these fine people in red shirts and on the picket line, and I had wished that my colleagues from the city council then had joined me. But we are here, and I hope that this will help make a strike not something that'll come to pass. Nobody wants to go on strike, but it is labor's only tool to even a playing field when the playing field is so unfair. And we can do a little bit of evening of that playing field by supporting this resolution. And again, for me, the question is, whose side am I on? And it's no shock to anybody here whose side I'm on, and I hope you join me on that side. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Barlow, and then Councilor Carpenter, then Councilor Kane, then Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. First, I want to say I have great appreciation for the nurses at UVMMC, and I recognize that their role in healthcare is a critically important one. And I recognize that the job can also be very demanding and challenging. I support unions and the right to collective bargaining, and I recognize that we absolutely need competitively compensated nurses in our community. I also recognize, though, that UVMMC is one of our city's most important institutional partners, and that partnership has been and remains essential in our response to community health issues, like the one we undertook during the pandemic and in the ongoing substance misuse disorder crisis we face now. Given the level of need, we must assume that UVMMC management has an interest in attracting and retaining top nursing talent. I'm not supportive of the council weighing in on this negotiation. First, I question the timing of this action. Why does the council want to involve itself now? And I've heard from council colleagues why, but to my mind, proposals have only recently been exchanged by parties, and most of us, like Councilor Carpenter mentioned, are not apprised of the details of those proposals or the trajectory of these negotiations, nor should we be. It's not our negotiation. It seems to be proceeding with meetings between the parties, and we have a number of pressing issues that require more immediate attention. But here we are tonight because this resolution is before us, and this isn't the first time. We've had other resolutions, one as recently as last year in support of the UVM support staff. And that one, as I mentioned earlier, had broad council sponsorship and support, including all of us that are here tonight. We also, I wasn't on the council then, but we passed a resolution back in 2018 during the nurses negotiation that year. Both of these prior resolutions, the one in 2023 and the one in 2018, they didn't take sides but encouraged both parties to negotiate a fair agreement. And when we do find ourselves weighing in on labor negotiations outside the city unions, encouraging a collaborative and fair outcome between the parties seems more appropriate role for us than taking sides, as this resolution does. And lastly, we have heard today from UVMMC that there are questions about some of the factual assertions in the whereas clauses, and we have heard your response tonight on how you view those concerns. But these do deserve more review, and we don't have UVMMC here tonight to speak, nor do I think we ought to. We're not arbitrating this negotiation here on the floor of the City Council. But we should understand more about that if we're going to pass something, and I think as Councilor Litwin said, we need to be sure that the things that we're passing are factually accurate. So I am not supporting this resolution tonight, but I would love the opportunity to support a fairer, or what I consider a more balanced resolution that if we just spend a little bit more time on, and I think we have that time, we've just chosen not to take it tonight. But I think we could have had more consensus on this, and I believe a better outcome. But I will not be supporting this tonight.
Thank you. We're now at 30 minutes on a 15-minute item, and Councilor Kane, you have not spoken yet.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I am an economics professor, and I teach about how markets work. I teach about market failures. So nursing is actually the classic example that economics professors use of a particular type of market failure called monopsony. So everyone's familiar with monopoly, where there's one seller. Monopsony is where there's one buyer. Even in the case of like a support staff, those jobs, the skills for those jobs are similar to skills for jobs that are, widely available for workers in this city. Nursing is a specialization that, you can't very easily, find competition among employers, in a particular region outside of major U.S. cities. And so there's a vulnerability to institutions, keeping wages artificially low, lower than where the supply and demand curves cross. I give lectures on this, and so I think it's, worthwhile to be weighing in here. So I've heard several colleagues say that it's important that we pass something balanced between, capital and labor. I've heard several colleagues highlight the importance of standing with labor, with weighing in support of unions. And, this is not, I don't view this as just a generic, like we're supporting labor over capital. Sure, there are disagreements between the whereas clause statistics cited by the union versus the hospital or the medical center negotiators. In policy debates, you're always going to see opposite sides citing different statistics. This is, I think, a case, though, where, we're just dealing with market failure. And the job of government is, in a market economy, is to try to help correct market failures. And so this is absolutely what we should be doing. And I don't think we should be hemming and hawing over the statistics and the whereas clauses. I think the symbolic support that we're showing tonight is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Carpenter, I think you have about 1 minute left on your 5 minutes to speak to
Thank
this.
you. I won't repeat myself and what I said before. It's interesting that Councilor Bergman said, well, we don't need the litany of the facts, but it's very hard for me to pass a resolution. If facts are presented, then I think we should figure that out. And that's all, one of the reasons I was asking for the additional 2 weeks, just to take the time to get that right. And I think we owe it to ourselves.
Counselor Newbeezer, you also have 1 minute in the round 2.
All right, very quickly, and I appreciate the time. I'll say I'm not planning on for the rest of my term, nor do I think I am here introducing resolutions to grandstand or for political points or for whatever it might be. I do my homework before I introduce something, and I'm very confident, and every single one of our factual assertions is cited by credible sources. The other piece is I am not surprised that UVMMC released a memo to this extent. I have spent my life in climate advocacy. The fossil fuel companies often have quite a bit of counterfactual narratives that they choose to employ. At the end of the day, climate change, like the reality of our economy and wealth inequality and affordability, are not disputable realities. So I'm proud to stand with labor. I can understand that we may, and I respect the counselors who have different views on this, but I will be supporting this, and I urge everyone to.
Thank you. Counselor Kane, did you want another minute? Counselor Grant, go ahead.
Thank you. Center myself, because I'm a little bit taken aback by some of the comments that I've heard tonight. You can't have it both ways. You can't say you support our nurses and then not support our nurses, because I really think that that's what we're looking at. Very simple decision here. I have personally seen and been involved in other resolutions where there might have been conflicting statistics because they were from different sources, or in fact, I would argue that certain things were wrong only to be ignored and the resolutions be voted on and passed. So I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on here that does not settle well with me at all. We know the following. We know that our nurses and the rest of the hospital staff have had to deal with dramatic increases in workplace violence, and they need to be compensated for that. We know that we have had long-term staffing issues at our hospitals that have affected waiting times, that have sometimes affected overall service that people get. The people of Burlington want to know that there's going to be stability within the primary and only hospital. I mean, literally, people get flown from upstate New York here. They get flown from other parts of the state here. We are the major hospital, and to get this staffing stability is really crucial, and it's been a long-term issue. This hospital, rather than pay nurses appropriately, has paid millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars for travel nurses. And you know, I feel that when I'm looking at the resolve clause, we're asking for fair negotiations. We're not asking to be involved in those negotiations. We're just stating that, you know, as a city, we support these vital workers that help maintain the health and well-being of our community. That has to mean something to us. It really does. And I think when you say, why do this now? Why not now? I think this is really important. And I think another 2 weeks, quite frankly, be an insult. And we're better than that. So I wholeheartedly support this. We have to do better to stabilize staff, to keep them here in our community. It doesn't do the city good to have the constant turnover. We want people who are part of our community, who know our community, who get to know their patients. That is very, very important in care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Yes, Mayor Mulvaney Stanek.
Thank you, Acting President Shannon. I will be brief because I know it's late, and I appreciate that you have time limits on your agendas these days versus the times when I was on council myself. I want to just go on record by saying I support this resolution, and as a former labor organizer for over a decade, I will tell you the language I'm looking at, and I'm most curious, Councilor Grant just mentioned this, are the resolve clauses. And after 11 years of organizing, this language is pretty straightforward. And what the most important thing that I see around the timing of this resolution is that it is concerning to me when communities don't weigh in on the beginning of bargaining because it shows we're not paying attention. And this is such a critical employer. These professions are so critical. It's really important, mostly as a signal to say the city of Burlington has a keen interest in making sure that both sides are fairly bargaining, that both sides are going to bring their best thinking, their best facts, their best work to make sure that the complexities of bargaining, a very difficult reality, our healthcare system is very broken. But this is an important moment for the city councilors, myself as the mayor, to say we are engaged, we're watching, we're here to support both sides in reaching a fair settlement that actually ultimately reaches the goals that benefit our larger community, state, and region, which is making sure the professionals want to stay here, they can afford to stay here. This is all the staff, not just the nurses, although this is what this refers to now. So I am glad that this resolution is before you today, and I appreciate that the language, frankly, doesn't get into the details of bargaining, because I think that is not an appropriate place for us to go this early on in bargaining. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think you're on your third time, and over many minutes, many times.
I'll give up future.
One sentence?
One sentence. I'll just say I did do my due diligence in reaching out to every counselor, I think adequately, and there was plenty of time. And I just want to put that on record because I'm going to pride myself, hopefully, in this work and being collaborative. And I tried my best to be. There was multiple edits incorporated into this resolution. Folks had quite, in my view, adequate time to collaborate on this.
Thank you. And I think we're ready for a vote and need a roll call.
Councilor Barlow?
No.
Councilor Bergman?
Yes.
Councilor Broderick?
Yes.
Councilor Carpenter? Councilor Grant?
Yes.
Councilor Kane?
Yes.
Councilor Litwin?
Yes.
Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes.
Acting City Council President Shannon?
No.
6 ayes, 3 nays, 3 recusals.
Okay, and the motion passes. Thank you. I don't know where President Travers went.
Thank you for
So,
your time.
Thank you. Oh, there you went. I will pass this back.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Shannon. We are now finished with our deliberative agenda. We had addressed item 7, our committee reports, earlier on in the meeting, so that now takes us to item 8 on our agenda, which is City Council General Affairs. Are there any councilors that wish to speak with respect to general affairs? Seeing none, we will turn to item 9, which is City Council President, council updates. I just have 2 items that I would like to raise. One I raised at the last meeting, and I'll bring it up again today, which is that if there are folks in our community that want to get more involved, we have a number of vacancies posted for Burlington boards and commissions. They are listed on the city website. Applications are due on May 15th, and so would encourage folks, if they're looking to get more involved, to take a look at the vacancies online and to submit an application by the 15th for our boards and commissions. One other thing that I wanted to bring up is that for a lot of good reasons, we have a lot of construction going on around the city right now in our downtown area with respect to fixing the old ravine sewer along Pine Street. We're down to one lane as we continue upgrades to that section of the Champlain Parkway. I have heard from a number of businesses that, while grateful for what this construction will mean when it's said and done, have run into some hurdles with respect to the construction being an obstacle to customers getting there during this period of time, and just wanted to take a moment to encourage folks to the extent possible to support these local businesses that may be impacted by ongoing construction. I stopped by the new Queen City Cafe on Pine Street this morning for a bacon, egg, and cheese on one of their homemade biscuits. It was very delicious, and would encourage folks to get out there to support these local businesses. That's it with respect to my updates. Mayor, that brings us to item 10, which is any updates from you.
Thank you, President Travers. I do have a few updates, and I am going to get into a better practice of having these written on the agenda so I can highlight a couple pieces and you can read the whole thing. So by next time, that will be the case. It's been busy. So just to start first with some general updates from my office, I marked the first month on the job, which is kind of wild how quickly it went, but there's a lot going on in the city. Next Monday, May 13th, we'll have another update on the fiscal year 25 budget. I really want to appreciate the woman sitting next to me, in particular, CAO Shad, who spent endless hours. She's been working on it, I can see, while we've been sitting here for hours, as well as all of the department heads, the staff within the CT office, the staff within probably pretty much every department, that people are bringing their best thinking, their creative thinking on how to address this $13 million gap. And even city unions have offered to help, which I very much appreciate it, because when I said in our press conference now about 2 weeks ago, we are in this together, it's generating a lot of really interesting and important ideas I think that we should use in the years to come, not just in this particular budget challenge that we're in. So again, on May 13th, we'll have an update that includes a lot of the solutions that we've begun to identify to close that gap on both the revenue side as well as the cost-saving side. Also, I've been told this is the Marvelous Nights of May. I think I have that right. I might rename that. But we'll start next week our information meetings. I remind counselors that we encourage you to participate. You'll get a deep dive into each of our departments and their budgets. And that will also include our enterprise funds, which we'll be talking about their anticipated rate change requests for the next fiscal year. That's for Burlington Electric and as well as our water division. My lovely budget advisors will be wrapping up work tomorrow. I've had 6 folks from the community, which I spoke about before, working alongside me to help innovate with ideas from their perspective. I find it very useful to have a collaborative approach to leadership from folks who are not within government. I plan to keep using that going forward, that model, and folks will be weighing in on our draft set of solutions that, again, we'll be rolling out later this week ahead of next week. One other just piece on the budget, community safety. It's my second big priority out of the gate, and we're holding a meeting tomorrow. I mentioned earlier in this meeting around cross departments, and so tomorrow I'm convening department heads who touch any element of community safety, and really a broader definition of that, because there's the obvious ones, the police and fire, but community safety issues are touching our libraries, our parks, pretty much most components of our city. So I'm convening folks to have a strategic conversation around what kind of immediate investments do we need to make within our budget. I do not want to deliver you a budget that lacks the ability to respond to what we're all living through, and making sure we're being thoughtful about, again, a comprehensive approach that goes across budgets and doesn't stop within a silo of police and fire. So look for that next week. As I said, it's going to be part of what we share soon. To everyone's glee, maybe except for the acting city attorney at the end of the table, we are actively involved in the hiring process for a new city attorney, as well as a deputy city attorney, and we have a vacancy in one of our assistant city attorneys. I'm sure Joe will really miss these late nights here in Contoy, so you can come back and visit anytime. But I hope by the end of the month to really be well into that process, and we have some great candidates I hear so far, so we are on our way to addressing that very needed capacity issue within our city attorney's office. One other general update before I do fast round updates. I've talked a little bit with some of the counselors around this table about the need to acknowledge some of the unresolved harm and tough conversations we've struggled to have as a community as we address the issues of Gaza and the issues of Israel, the ongoing harm, war, just suffering that's happening overseas. But I want to acknowledge, I've noticed as even a resident before mayor, that we've struggled to have this conversation as a community. It's triggering, it's traumatizing. We haven't been at our best with trying to engage in these difficult conversations. So I've asked the Community Justice Center if they would be open for convening some restorative circles. They're very eager. I am inviting counselors to be part of that dialogue. For me, this is part of doing peace work. It is part of doing community leadership work, is that we acknowledge the interconnection between these issues and local government, but we also acknowledge where more work needs to happen outside of this chamber. And I want to make sure that we are on our growing edge as city leaders to make sure we are convening folks so that we have more resilience when we tackle thorny issues like that when it does come to this body. And this is one way to help us get there. I know the schools have started a version of this, and I look forward to partnering with whoever would like to do this on a community-based level as well. Finally, probably of interest as well, is our upcoming warm season and the ongoing chronic issue of our plight of unhoused people in our community, and what we will be doing as a city in terms of camping on public lands, camping in parks, etc. I've had several parts of our city working diligently on developing a plan, which I hope to have within the next 10 days. So it's clear that we're consistent, and we also know why people are allowed to be on certain land versus not. I can't, in good conscience, say people can't be on public land. That's not within my ethos. I don't think that's probably within anyone's ethos around the table. But we're in a very difficult spot when the state continues to fail to come up with comprehensive, dignified solutions to our housing crisis and our unhoused crisis in particular. So we'll be looking for that soon. I want to make sure that if we say folks can't camp here, they know where they can go and get some basic level of dignified support. That, to me, is a de-escalation tactic as much as a humanitarian tactic. So look for that soon. All right, flash round. Ready? Okay, city highlights. I won't talk faster. I'm just only going to mention a couple. I want to acknowledge publicly that Norm Baldwin, who is our city attorney, has... oh, my God. Not enough caffeine. Okay. It's not even like 12. Sorry. All right. City engineer. This is why we got a team. City engineer. But the importance about Norm Baldwin is he has served the city for 33 years. This is one of those great moments of when folks start on an entry-level job and are loyal to public service. So I just want to publicly acknowledge Norm, the city engineer, for his long years of service to the city. He'll be moving on to a new role on May 24th. A couple of important events. May 15th is the opening day for many of our parks and public spaces, including the waterfront, our marina, etc. Kids Weekend is coming up on May 17th, 18th. That's my kids' favorite holiday here in the city. So there's great programming throughout the city on that day. And then finally, Juneteenth, of course, is an annual and important holiday here in Burlington. REIB is hard at work. That's June 15th, and it will be programming from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then finally, our CEDO department, it will be developing and implementing a community engagement process around the Memorial Block. I know the former council had a lot of interest in this. I myself want to make sure we have a diligent and transparent process as we continue to work through what is possible in these next few months. So be looking for that soon. And then finally, just in terms of community engagement, last thing I'll just mention, I had the great honor of being part of the installation process of the new settled minister of the UU at the top of Church Street this last weekend, Reverend Karen Johnston. And I have to say, I've been to several faith communities over the last several months, but this was really a moment of community, and it's been very interesting getting to know other leaders within our community. It was a wonderful moment. I just want to publicly express my appreciation for that invitation. And in the spirit of other leaders I've met with, which has been very generative around the possibilities of partnership in many creative ways. I've met with the Howard Center incoming CEO, the CEO of UVM Medical Center, the president of UVM, the entire board of the BHA, which is the Burlington Housing Authority, Cathedral Square, Burlington Business Association, ACLU of Vermont, the president of Champlain College. I've been busy. And that's because I think partnerships and relationships are critical for the success of the city. And as much as it's about meeting with leaders, it's also about walking side by side with impacted folks. So the last two things I'll mention is that I encourage this for city councilors as well. I was able to walk alongside the street outreach team that's we contract with at Howard Center for 2 hours just last week. It's very important that folks take that opportunity as we, again, grapple with understanding who is truly suffering in our community and what are the complexities of trying to really solve it. It's not easy. It was, I had a sense, but it is very eye-opening to walk around and see what folks are experiencing, folks who are often invisible to most people in the public because you want to get away or you're not coming downtown. I think it's very instructive for leaders to have that experience to walk alongside these outreach workers, and they are more than willing to share their time and expertise. So just encourage you to do so. And then finally, I been monitoring the student encampment up at UVM in terms of their rights and their ability to take a stand to align with their beliefs around what's going on again with Gaza. I've made sure that we are clear about the role of the city versus the role of UVM and who has authority where. And ultimately, the goal of protecting students' safety is paramount to me, as well as really making sure that we know this is an educational moment as well as a activism moment. And I've appreciated students being peaceful. I've appreciated UVM keeping me informed on a daily basis. And I wish for folks to continue to move in that direction so that we can have a productive conversation and model that, frankly, for the rest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate all those updates. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Barlow. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous, and we are adjourned at 9:43 p.m. Thank you.